This meeting of the General Policy Committee to order. It's February 13th, 2020. Thank you all so much for being here. Many of you, this might be your first meeting, so let me just kind of explain our process and procedures. In a second, we'll adopt our agenda. If you don't have a copy of the agenda, they're available, I think, somewhere. But there's no real need to have one in your hand. The order of business, the first item we'll take up after we approve our minutes is the buffer zone item, and I know many of you are here for that. So that will be first on our agenda. After that, we're going to get our quarterly update from the Gainesville Police Department. And then the last item on the agenda will be our violence prevention initiative and sort of where we are in that process. As far as your opportunity to address the commission, we will first hear a presentation from our staff, and then we will hear public input, and then we'll turn back to the commission for deliberation. Okay? Any questions? Okay. So with that, we need a motion to adopt our agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second to adopt our agenda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That motion passes. The next item is approval of our minutes from the January 23rd meeting. Were there any additions, corrections, or is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second to approve our minutes. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That motion passes as well. Okay, so our first item for discussion today is to consider buffer zones around medical facilities. So Ms. Hoffman, I guess I will turn it over to you.
Is there a clicker?
On the podium.
Am I supposed to stand at the podium?
Wherever you're comfortable.
Can I sit?
That's fine.
Hi, Lindsay Hoffman, Policy Oversight Administrator. So, buffer zones surrounding medical facilities was a research request that we received from Commissioner Hayes Santos. I'm not sure if you wanted to make any remarks before I jump in.
Sure. This request has come out of working with one of the clinics in our area, medical facilities that has continued issues with public safety concerns and with access to healthcare. And that's I've been out there many times, volunteered out there, and it's just we need to look at different way our current laws. I believe our current laws are working to be able to protect people's access to healthcare. I hope that we can move forward on moving the direction of creating buffer zones to be able to protect access to healthcare. Thank you.
So what we've researched is sort of the umbrella level issue without getting into the specifics of Gainesville. So our country's had a historical tension between the First Amendment rights of protesters and the rights of who or whatever they're protesting. And this comes up fervently and more specifically when the tension is between protesters and patients seeking access to medical care, specifically reproductive medical care. Over time, some of this tension has turned violent and even deadly when physicians and other medical providers have been murdered, including here in Florida and Pensacola in the early 90s. Today's discussion is looking at some of the remedies attempted by various governmental bodies in this space. So, in 1994, the federal government waded into these waters with the FACE Act. That's the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act of 1994. This federal law prohibits the using force, threat of force, or physical obstruction to actually or attempt to injure, intimidate, or interfere with a person obtaining or providing reproductive health services. It also prohibits intentional damage or destruction of a facility that provides reproductive health services. And the FACE Act also actually extends these protections to places of religious worship and those seeking to exercise their First Amendment right of religious freedom. In cases brought under the FACE Act, those are brought by the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division, and violations may include criminal penalties, fines, and injunctive relief. The Civil Rights Division attorneys also work with criminal prosecutors, providing technical assistance or conducting joint prosecutions. State versions of this act have been enacted in at least California, New York, and Washington. 9 other states and the District of Columbia have enacted other statutes that deal with harassment at healthcare facilities, but Florida is not one of them. There are, though, other tools in public safety's toolbox that can be used to protect order at healthcare facilities, and those include the criminal laws, assault, battery, trespass, disorderly conduct, and loitering. There are also traffic laws available when obstructions are present, and noise ordinances. So some jurisdictions, though, have gone a step further and created additional protections around medical facilities. Buffer zones primarily serve the purpose of protecting citizens' access to health care, specifically by separating protesters from individuals seeking that medical care. One highly debated and litigated solution has been buffer zones. These are areas around medical facilities where behavior is particularly regulated. And traditionally, they've taken a few forms. There's the fixed buffer zone, which is set around a permanent location. So you set a distance around a permanent location, like a healthcare facility, where you're going to regulate behavior. There's a floating buffer zone, which follows an individual person and prevents any activity in a certain distance of that person as they move around. And then it's also possible to combine those two, where you regulate behavior within a fixed area as a person moves around. Here are some examples of jurisdictions that have buffer zones. There are some in Florida, and there are some across the country. We'll talk about some of them in more detail, but I'd first like to sort of introduce a general theme here, and that's that courts have been very active in this space, both in shaping the umbrella legal parameters and precedent of the concepts of buffer zones, but then also courts are going in and shaping the actual boundaries of particular buffer zones when they come before them. So I'll show you how that plays out as we go. In Florida, we were able to find 3 examples, so we'll focus on those particularly now. The first one is in West Palm Beach, and this one is a bit of an outlier because this ordinance bans all shouting or amplified sound from any public street or private property within 100 feet of a healthcare center's property line. The facility needs to post conspicuous quiet zone signage around the facility. This ordinance stemmed from a 2005 arson incident and originally included a provision with a 20-foot protest buffer zone as well. But when the ordinance was challenged in court, the court determined that the noise portion did appropriately balance the rights of protesters and the rights of patients who might be ill, undergoing surgery, or in recovery. But the 20-foot buffer zone was struck down as an overreach that infringed on people's right to free speech. So as I just noted, this is a pattern that we'll see throughout the conversation where courts are tailoring these policies as narrowly as possible to achieve stated goals. The second example of a buffer zone in Florida is found in Pensacola. Their ordinance came after attacks resulted in the deaths of 3 healthcare workers in 1993 and 1994. And this law creates designated law enforcement areas. It prohibits anyone from entering, obstructing, or creating an obstruction within 8 feet of the property line of a clinic that provides abortion services, including where that stretches into the public right-of-way. Exceptions are, as expected, employees, patients, and other invitees. And excluded from this restriction is any paved sidewalk intended for pedestrian use. This ordinance isn't particularly helpful, though, at the moment because although it's been on the books for a long time, it hasn't actually been enforced in a little over a decade because there hasn't been a qualifying medical facility within the city limits in that time. The most extensive example of a buffer zone in Florida was not created by ordinance or by legislative action. It was actually created by a court after an injunction was filed by a medical clinic in Melbourne against the protesters who were regularly impeding access to their entrance. This injunctive relief eventually did make it all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, which again tweaked the parameters of the buffer zone itself. The court looked at the property and how it was situated and determined that it was appropriate to establish a 36-foot fixed buffer zone around the clinic entrances and driveway. The original injunction created a full 36-foot buffer zone around the entire property. So the Supreme Court narrowed it to say that they could do a 36-foot fixed buffer zone around the entrances and the driveway, but they struck down the part of the buffer zone in areas where the clinic was bordered by private property and where they hadn't had a problem in the past. The court also struck down limits and signage that were part of the original ordinance, or the original injunction. The original injunction prohibited any observable images, but the court believed that this was broader than necessary to limit threats to clinic patients or reduce their anxiety and hypertension in the clinic. The court said that prohibiting threatening signs would satisfy the goal, that was already against the law, and that the clinic could pull its curtains to further protect their patients. So this is what was left after the Supreme Court decision, a 36-foot fixed buffer zone from the entrances and the driveway. And this sort of brings us to the bottom line in these cases. They begin when compelling government interests are identified. So in this case, the compelling government interests were protecting a woman's freedom to seek lawful medical or counseling services, ensuring public safety and order, promoting the free flow of traffic on public streets and sidewalks, protecting citizens' property rights, and assuring residential privacy. So those compelling interests were established. Then the ordinance or injunction is tasked with crafting the narrowest possible restrictions to meet these goals. In Melbourne, for example, it was important that the protesters could still be seen and heard by people approaching and entering the clinic. If any element burdens speech more than is necessary, it will be struck down. Here, noise limits were okay because too much noise during surgery and recovery could have a traumatic impact on patients. So the West Palm Beach ordinance, Melbourne has a noise element. So those are okay because they could have a traumatic impact on patients when they're recovering. But a blanket ban on observable images was too much when the clinic could close its curtains to protect patients. So there's also consideration given to how a rule comes into being. The Supreme Court in the case about Melbourne drew this distinction. So they said that an ordinance represents a legislative choice to promote particular societal interests, whereas an injunction, though it still risks being an overreach, can be highly tailored to one set of circumstances. So how an ordinance or an injunction comes into being makes a difference when the court is looking at these rules. So there are 3 other court cases that should be part of our conversation about buffer zones. And they're from the Supreme Court. So Colorado established a statewide buffer zone that made it to the US Supreme Court in 2000. Colorado's law created a combination buffer zone. It says that when you're within 100 feet of any medical facility, you may not knowingly approach within 8 feet another person unless that person consents to speak with you. This buffer zone was upheld by the Supreme Court. The court found that the state, excuse me, the court found that the state had a compelling interest. Its police powers allow it to protect its citizens' health and safety, justifying a focus on access to healthcare facilities and the avoidance of potential trauma to patients because of confrontational protests. The court also found that the law passed its test of being content neutral because it regulates where some speech may occur, but it doesn't regulate what the speech is. It applies to all demonstrators regardless of the content of their speech. And the state's interests in public safety aren't related to the content of the speech. There was no noise limit established here. People could still see and read the signs that were held by protesters, and the 8-foot distance was still considered a normal conversational distance. It doesn't require protesters to move out of the way if someone is approaching them. The law just limits them from knowingly approaching other people. The court found that this was a valid time, place, and manner regulation that's narrowly drawn to achieve the government's interest. So that was Hill versus Colorado. That was Colorado's state statute in 2000. Then in 2014, the state of Massachusetts buffer zone was challenged at the US Supreme Court. Their state law prohibited any person from knowingly standing on a public right-of-way or sidewalk within 35 feet of an entrance or driveway to a reproductive health clinic. So this was a fixed buffer zone. In this case, the US Supreme Court struck down Massachusetts' law. The court found that the law was content neutral, just like Colorado's, and that it served the legitimate state interest of public safety and access to health care, but they also found that this law was not narrowly tailored enough. It took away too many of the protesters' options for expression and therefore infringed too far on their First Amendment rights. Also, the state in this case didn't show that they had exhausted all of their existing remedies and less intrusive tools first. The Supreme Court noted that, for example, local traffic ordinances could address obstructions on the clinic's driveways, and the police could already order crowds to disperse. This, though, decision stopped short of overturning the Hill case from 14 years before, and that's kind of what everyone was expecting to happen, was that the McCullen case would make a decision about whether or not the Hill case remained valid, and the court stopped short of doing that. And this leaves us with a dilemma, because these two decisions are in conflict in several ways, and that conflict has not been resolved, which is an acknowledged fact. So, where are we now? We're in Chicago. The city of Chicago created an ordinance modeled after the Colorado law that was upheld in that Hill case. And actually, it's a little bit narrower than Colorado's ordinance or statute. Chicago's ordinance creates a 50-foot radius. Colorado's was 100 feet. But otherwise, they're pretty identical. So Chicago says that no one within a 50-foot radius around a reproductive health care clinic entrance may approach within 8 feet of another individual without their consent. This ordinance has also been challenged. The courts who have decided this matter so far have distinguished this ordinance and upheld it. They're saying that it's still appropriately narrow. They say that unlike Massachusetts law, which was a blanket ban, this one is narrowly tailored to protect to protect patients' privacy interests in avoiding unwanted and intrusive communication in situations where they can't otherwise realistically avoid those interactions. And even when people are in the 50-foot zone, they can stand anywhere. They can express themselves in any number of ways. They can speak to passersby, they can chant, they can hold signs, they can offer literature. They don't have to move out of the way if someone's approaching them. And it applies regardless of the speaker's points of view. So the only restriction is that you can't approach within 8 feet of another person when you're in that zone without that person's consent. This case has also, though, been appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court, and that's where it's sitting right now. It's pending a decision on cert by the court, and as it sits, this case has the power to really either uphold buffer zones or do away with them completely. It's actually in an odd posture in that it's been pending a decision on cert for an oddly long period of time. We've been in touch with the respondents. We've
Ms.
been in
Hoffman,
touch. Yes.
Could you perhaps
Talk about what cert is.
Yeah, some of us don't have law degrees.
Sorry.
But we're glad that you do. Yeah, explain certiorari.
Yeah, really what's happening right now is that the U.S. Supreme Court has to decide whether or not they want to hear this case, and they haven't made that decision yet. Usually, with the way that this case is sitting, by this point, at the posture where it is, usually they would have made that decision by now, and it's in a weird holding pattern. We've spoken with the city of Chicago. They also don't understand why it's in this holding pattern, and they're confused as well.
How
So,
long?
since August. And it was the decision on whether to hear it or not was supposed to be made the first week in October, and it's been silent since then. So we're all waiting.
And I'm sorry to interrupt again, but
No.
if they choose not to hear it, then basically buffer zones are okay.
The Chicago ordinance will stand.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where that is now.
Okay.
So to leave you with some of the considerations, sort of distilling it all, with some of the considerations needed when contemplating a step like this. The first is the preliminary decision of the appropriate path forward, a legislative solution or a court-ordered judicial solution by filing an injunction. Then the city would need to establish a compelling interest if we were going to go the ordinance route. The city would need to establish compelling interests that are not being defended in any other way. The city would need to show that existing laws and protections are not sufficient to achieve these compelling interests. And the city would need to establish rules that were both content neutral and narrowly drawn to achieve those stated goals. So that's my shop's foundational level overview of this topic. Of course, the city attorney's office and GPD work with this on an operational level, and I'm sure have other angles to consider. But that is the extent of our research, and of course, our reminder of where we are in the policy process as well. So I'm happy to take any questions or defer to any other remarks or presentations.
Thank you, Ms. Hoffman, very much, to the team for your work on this. How do we go about establishing a compelling state interest? Is that through testimony of practitioners or clients, or to return to Ms. Shalley?
Yes, so I hope what you all took from this is that in these cases, a particular buffer zone has been upheld. The thing with these, as you can see, this isn't the case. A lot of times when you all are interested in regulating, you can just look to like, oh, well, the city of Tallahassee has an ordinance on this. We could potentially copy it and that would work for us. With these type of ordinances, they have to be specifically crafted for this exact location, what's going on, narrowly tailored, content neutral. So to your question, the first step that has to be done is the city has to go out and document what are the specific issues going on here, because So that's the first step. It's the actual what's occurring that's creating the public safety problem. Because then the next thing you have to do is figure out, okay, are there existing laws, both state laws, federal laws, and city ordinances that could be used to deal with those that have nothing to do with imposing on speech? After exhausting those existing laws, then you can go on to craft narrowly tailored regulations that address the problems. And that's why some of these you see, the problems were around, amplified sound and those type of things. Others, it's physical proximity and people being threatening to persons. But again, it's all just very location specific. So it's the actual what's happening on the site that's causing the threat.
Okay, so if there is a finding of a compelling interest through past incidents that we've documented, or if we give direction to start this, what happens over the next 6 months or whatever. If we find that, then we have to find the least restrictive means possible to address those issues that we've identified.
That's correct, including existing laws.
Right, so we start with the existing laws, and if those are not found adequate to address the issues that we've identified, then we can move to crafting something new. But it's strict scrutiny, and it's gotta be the least restrictive. Okay. Yes, Mr. Simpson.
Thank you.
And again, I'm sorry, Commissioner, before we get, right now we're just asking questions. We'll get into deliberations after we hear public input, because we wanna hear what, the folks that are going through this. But yeah, just any sort of, informational stuff we'll cover right now, so go ahead.
Okay, so looking into research and particularly the buffer zone around medical facilities, B section, and we specifically talk about here in Gainesville, I noticed that in the past, a particular health facility here in Gainesville applied for a permit, was shot down. So I guess my question is, based on the past attempts from this particular facility, where we as city officials deemed that it wasn't necessary, or they didn't have enough information for us to go out and really uphold the permit, or just to take it to a step further where we have an ordinance in place for a buffer zone. So I guess my question is, this was in 2013. What has changed since then? It's 7 years later. Have they reapplied? Have they tried to come back to the city for permitting? What has changed since then?
I don't have information on that. That's
Okay.
not, what we
Right.
have is just what was in the research. I suspect there's more information about that in the room though.
Right, and that was the thing, because I'm looking at the history, and you have GPD was involved, we were involved, and GPD went out and looked at the situation and said, well, you know what, not in those terms, but it's not necessary, if you will. So I guess my question is, what has changed from then to now? And has it been documented, and do we have evidence of that from GPD or from anybody else?
So I'm not aware of what she's referring to. I don't know if I was given access to the report she's referring to. You know, what kind of permit was applied for?
Well, yeah, we have a policy currently in place, 26-189, which prohibits the congregation on a public sidewalk or street without a permit. And then we also have another policy, which is 1980, which prevents solicitation on public and private property. But it doesn't necessarily specifically addresses the congregation outside of a healthcare facility. Their enforcement can help to eliminate some public health problems.
So if I'm interpreting what you're saying correctly, there is a city ordinance that regulates when you can block a public sidewalk, a public street for an event. So it's like an event permit. So if you wanted to block that off, you would have to apply to the city, and if it's a festival or something, you tell you what your safety plan is, et cetera, et cetera. I can only assume they applied to block the sidewalk for something, and it went through a review process, and somewhere along the line, they denied it based on what the use was for. That's a guess. I don't know specifics to that particular.
Well, the protester, they they were granted a 40-day permit and they violated it, and during that time, it was not revoked from us. They violated the permit, that's what I'm reading here, but it was not revoked, so they continue to have that 40-day
Okay,
opportunity.
so the protesters applied for the
They
permit.
applied.
I'm vaguely remembering this situation. So they applied for the permit to block the sidewalk or use the sidewalk. So, because we have a city ordinance that says that you can't permanently block a sidewalk, otherwise you would be a criminal violation of disorderly conduct under the disorderly conduct ordinance. So you can apply for a permit to block the sidewalk or stand and obstruct. Your report says it was approved, and that allegations came in that they somehow violated the provisions of the permit and it wasn't pulled. But I don't recall the specifics without researching it as to when we were notified of the violation and who had the authority to pull the permit. I know that
It was said it was reviewed by the City Commission's Public Safety Committee.
Commissioner Santos thinks he has some
Oh,
knowledge of this.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe what happened, there was a permit that protesters did file for a permit, but I think that was kind of not, the clinic came to the city commission
Right.
asking for a buffer zone ordinance.
Okay.
And since the city commission at that time did not want to move forward I was on the commission for various reasons. I think what's changed is we have a commission that, at least I believe, it would kind of put women's access to healthcare at a higher priority than that commission at that time. Or at
Right,
least that.
but I just want to know the history and how we got to this point based on the
And there
research
are
that I-
audience members who,
Yeah.
I think, were filed for those permits and we're going to start trying to.
Well, and there was also not the case law at that
Yeah.
time that we have now. And so I think legal advice at that time was that they had generally been struck down. The Colorado case hadn't happened yet. So that's part of it too.
Our office did write a memorandum in 2013 to the Public Safety Committee because that commission was considering the very same thing that you're considering now, and our analysis was the same, the response was the same as it is now.
Okay.
So you can do it, it just has to be very narrowly tailored.
Okay. Any other questions?
No, thank you.
Okay, let's hear from members of the public. So if you'd like to address us on this issue, come forward to the lectern here. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. There's a little clock on the lectern that lets you know what your time is. When you have 1 minute left, a little yellow light will come on. That's just your signal to start wrapping it up. And then when your 3 minutes has expired, I'll ask you to return to your seat and allow the next person to come up and address us. Just tell us who you are for our record, if you would. Welcome.
Hi. I'm Kristen. I'm the manager at Brennan Moses Women's Health Center, a medical health facility here in Gainesville. I am requesting that the city look into an ordinance for this, really for any medical facility. We need a buffer zone. We have a constant presence in front of our facility. They crowd the driveways. It makes it very hard to see around people to exit and enter the property safely. And it also violates some privacy as far as I'm concerned. The people who stand on the sidewalks actively try to engage the people who are coming and going from our facility, and that's not okay. Specifically, 2 things: safety, which I just talked about. If we had a buffer zone, it would allow clients to enter and exit the property safely, unimpeded. There'll be their vision, sight vision will be clear to enter and exit, and that's important. It would also give our clients privacy. We all, maybe we take our privacy for granted, but when you're accessing healthcare and you have people in your face trying to talk to you, that's a huge violation of your privacy. So that's two reasons why we should have a buffer zone. By adopting a medical facility buffer zone ordinance, the city will provide protection to those citizens seeking health care and will demonstrate that the right to privacy when seeking health care, the right to unimpeded access to health care, and the right to health care free from targeted harassment is just as important as the right to protest, and one should not be valued over the other. I respectfully ask the commission to take up this ordinance and show the people of Gainesville that their safety, privacy, and access to care are values that matter in this city. As far as evidence, I mean, all you need to do is show up on a clinic day and you can see how people are crowding and how clients are targeted specifically. That's all the evidence you need. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. Anybody else like to speak on this issue? Welcome.
My name is Allison Hayes, and I support Gainesville creating buffer zones around our medical facilities. In the past in Florida, picketing and extremists have blocked streets and obstructed driveways in front of medical clinics. Extremists have also been known to verbally accost and threaten both patients and employees entering medical facilities. No one ever has any kind of medical surgical procedure without advanced, careful consideration and consultation with one's medical provider. We should do everything we can to prevent harassment and guarantee the safety and passage of all individuals who enter into any medical facility in Gainesville, Florida. A buffer zone will be one way to help protect patients' rights and access to safe health care. I strongly support this measure.
Thank you very much. Would anybody else like to speak on this issue? Welcome.
Hello, my name is Kai Christmas. I organize with Planned Parenthood of Southeast and North Florida, and I just wanted to get up here and say that I support this and ask you all to support this too. That's
Very
all
good.
I've got.
Thank you. Thanks for being with us. Would anybody else like to speak? Welcome.
My name is Victoria Englert, and I'm here to support the buffer zones. If we didn't isolate abortion care to these small nonprofit providers, women wouldn't be the target of violence and harassment when seeking care. We have a bigger problem. Doctors aren't able or willing. In 2019, a survey by obstetrics and gynecology found that although the majority of OBGYNs have encountered patients seeking abortion, only 24% have performed the procedure themselves. Doctors are scared for their lives. Since 1977, the National Abortion Federation has tracked violence and disruptions against abortion providers. Per their statistics, there have been 11 murders and 26 attempted murders due to anti-abortion violence to date. Doctors aren't trained. In 2013, a survey of 161 physician residency programs across the United States found only half provided abortion procedure training in their standard curriculum. Doctors and hospitals are barred from providing services. In 2016, a report from the ACLU found that 1 in 6 U.S. hospital beds fall under the rule that directives from Catholic hospitals which prohibit a range of reproductive health services, including contraception, sterilization, many infertility treatments, and abortion, even when a woman's life or health is jeopardized by a pregnancy. In some states, more than 40% of hospitals have to abide by these rules. Buffer zones are the least we can do for individuals seeking basic and essential medical care.
Thank you.
I'm Donald Shepard, People's Representative, and I support this meeting in behalf of what had been said prior to me speaking. This is a critical thing we need in our city. When we have to deal with these issues and a woman or family's life comes to the fact with tearing down statues that have been going on in the city of Gainesville, should never be done. When those individuals tore those statues down, they violated the people's rights. They violated our city's rights, and our city did nothing about it. So I ask for those statues to be put back up, and maybe a buffer zone be put around a fence or something with an alarm system on them to stop this from happening ever again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Have the next speaker, please. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Jenny Boylan. We showed up late, but I just wanted to speak because I have volunteered as a clinic escort at this clinic. And I'm obviously in support of the buffer zone for a few reasons. Just very quickly, some people who come to the clinic are not bothered by protesters, and that is awesome. But some people are incredibly bothered. I think about, these protesters, it's not, they think of people who are on the other side as murderers. And not just murderers, but like about to commit a murder. And so having to walk through that crowd is really intense for a lot of people. And being a clinic escort, we also, I haven't done it in maybe a year now, but we don't go to the edge of the property because we don't want to interact with these folks because they harass us. They've sexually harassed clinic escorts before. So anything that could keep patients who are just trying to live their lives from that sort of like vitriolic hate would be really, I think, beneficial for our community, patients, women, the world, etc. Okay.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank you.
Does anybody else like to speak on this topic?
Hi, my name is Tess. I'm a current clinic employee and often go outside and escort. And I was just thinking about the ways that we're talking about how narrowly and trying to protect First Amendment rights. And I just think about the protocol that is in place now. I know that several months ago, the city surveyors came out and marked out the line of the private property so that we knew where the protesters were allowed or not allowed to be, and they were told that should they cross that line, they would be arrested for trespassing. But I just want to note that the current, so I know that they're allowed to be on public property, but the fact that they will walk very slowly across our driveway, really impeding people's ability to enter or exit the premises, and truly like a traffic problem as people are trying to turn in. So I recognize that we are trying to protect people's ability to gather or express their First Amendment rights. But sorry, I'm not being very eloquent, but that a buffer zone would, just being able to get that driveway clear and protected would be really valuable, and not to stop them from being able to make their voices heard, but from across the street where maybe their noise would be less affecting to our patients.
Thank you. Could I have the next speaker, please?
Hello, my name is Jessica McLeod. I am a patient advocate at Bread and Roses. I've been there for about 2 years. Before that, I was a clinic escort for a few months, and I believe that our patients and my fellow coworkers do not deserve to be harassed on our way to work. I don't believe that we should have comments made about our bodies, about our job, which we are here to provide a service and at the best that we can do. And I don't think it's also fair to our patients to be coming into, for some, a very stressful situation, already even more amplified by people they don't even know yelling in their faces. I love my job, I love working there, and I hope you consider passing this buffer zone. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. Welcome.
My name's Kavya. I just wanted to echo on some of the points that other people have said. I've just started escorting this semester at the clinic, and I just wanted to note that, a lot of these women already have a lot of psychological and emotional barriers between them and the clinic, and to add another external barrier that often involves attacking their moral character and their religious validity and just how they are as a person, not only to the employees, the doctors, myself, other escorts, but the patients itself, that shouldn't be permitted at all. People deserve to have access to healthcare in a way that doesn't cause them emotional trauma. And echoing on a point that was made before, some people are okay with entering the clinic with the protesters in front, but others are visibly and verbally distressed, expressed to me that they're distressed by the protesters kind of attacking them as they enter. And another point is that as escorts, we kind of stand like in front of the door, but the protesters, even though there's a trespassing line, like they're allowed to stand kind of out in the front where they're sometimes the first people that these clients or these patients can talk to or can like see. So oftentimes like they're kind of blocked off by these protesters and like that's the first person that they come to, and like they even get confused between escorts and protesters sometimes, where like they won't even trust the escorts to escort them into the clinic because they can't tell the difference since the protesters are allowed to be so close to the facility. I just think it's like unnecessary trauma to these patients to have to, you know, kind of like figure out like, okay, how can I avoid this protester and get inside the clinic, and like, oh, who's that person in the front? Like, can I trust them? Are they an escort? It's just something that shouldn't be permitted, and these women should have access to health care in a way that doesn't cause them this sort of distress.
Thank you. Could I have the next speaker, please?
Hi, my name is Joe Corder, and in the past I've done clinic escort work, and there are people out there, sometimes they're louder than others. There's people even more disrespectful than what I've heard mentioned here. In the past, there was a fellow who used to come and scream out, holler loudly outside, "Mommy, I'm inside you. Mommy, don't kill me, Mommy." It was repulsive. The only way to shut him up was to actually engage with him as an escort and try to talk to him. So what we have now as a level of activity could escalate. Also, in a larger organizational sense, the anti-choice movement can swarm clinics, draw large gatherings in, where instead of what we have right now, with just maybe a dozen people outside, 20 people outside, there could be 100 people outside. So I think it's really important that we do this and step forward on it. Other places have done it. I think it's important to make sure what we do passes, but it's a very important thing to me, just as a human, as a woman. I can't imagine how much more important it is, and especially as a patient. I had a friend who had an abortion. I worked with her when she was having it. It is not a light decision to make, and so I really hope to support this measure. Thank you.
Thank you. Have the next speaker, please. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Taylor Ruffino. Thank you so much for considering this ordinance. I currently escort at Bread and Roses and have firsthand witnessed myself and also people trying to access health care to extreme harassment. Their patients have expressed privacy concerns as well. They're afraid that they would be outed. If their family knew, they would be disowned. And so to have that level of fear walking in to access health care is traumatizing for them.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak on this issue? Last call. Okay, thank you all so much for being here, for sharing your thoughts and ideas with us. It's very helpful. So we'll turn back to the commission for deliberation. Commissioner Santos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I first want to thank all of you for coming and speaking. It's not an easy thing to do on this issue and putting yourself out there. We do got to do a motion that kind of will help us kind of move forward and take those steps necessary that we need to do to make sure that this is going to be most likely will be litigated. So we need to make sure that we have a strong ordinance that is built on a good foundation to be able to survive legal challenges. With clinics closing around the South and with laws being put in place both in our state and the states around us, there is going to be more pressure on our clinics, both in patients who are going to be coming to our clinics already see patients who come from states around us. And there's also going to be, as clinics are closing around the South, there's going to be less places that anti-choice protesters will go. So they will start to narrow down on us even more so because there's less places we go, so they'll go to us more. So we need to do everything we can to ensure that we protect the healthcare access for women, especially in this time of repeated attacks of women's choice and control of her body. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any other thoughts? Commissioner Johnson and Commissioner Simmons.
Thanks. I have a couple of questions. Hopefully someone will be able to help me. How long has Bread and Roses been in existence?
Kristen, how long have y'all been open?
30 plus years.
30 plus.
And if within those 30+ years, how many people have been arrested for trespassing?
I'm sorry.
How many people have been arrested for trespassing in that time?
How many times did you call, or how many times people have been arrested?
Give us both.
Well, I would have to, I can look into that. Not very often as far as the trespassing, we call frequently for trespassing, but nothing ever seems to get done. So.
Okay. Has there ever been any instances of, outside of the harassment with people, verbally harassing people, have there ever been any instances of people like taking pictures or trying to disseminate information, that you know of with?
Frequently, we have people taking pictures. We have seen pictures of people's license plates and staff members online. So as people enter and exit the clinic, they're taking pictures of the license plate. They're verbally telling people that they took pictures of the license plate, and then they're then posting them on social media.
Are there any laws against that?
They're standing on public property.
You could take a picture of a person walking to a healthcare clinic and their license plate and then post it online.
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty then. I'm really interested in hearing what your motion is. I'm fully supportive of this. I think you're right on, target when you say that a lot of people are going to be coming from other states to access healthcare in Florida. It is already happening. And it's important to note that this, it is healthcare, but I want to be even more explicit about it because it's not just, people aren't mad because people are trying to get like blood pressure medicine, like people are mad because women are trying to get an abortion, and people's feelings around that, and with the intimidation and extreme harassment that happens around that, it's just simply wrong. So I think that whatever we can do as a commission, as a community to support women in this is going to be important. So I'm, after we hear from everyone else, I'm interested in hearing what your motion is.
Great, thank you. Commissioner.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank everyone for coming out and voicing their opinions and concerns, and I think that's what we needed to hear as a commission, and that was the purpose of the line of questioning I was asking earlier. How often is this going on? What's going on? What are we doing as a city to alleviate some of this? So how can we help? So it was great that everyone came out and shared their stories, and the staff came out and let us know about what's actually going on, and something is broken. We need to fix it. So I'm interested also in hearing what Commissioner Hayes-Santos' motion is. And like Commissioner Johnson says, we're not angry at someone for going to get some blood pressure work done or check. And so this is a very emotional topic, and it's very important. This is something that's been going on throughout the country for years. So I think we need to look at it and look at how we can assist in making sure that everyone's rights are not violated, and what's the best way to do that. So I'm wanting to hear what you have to say, and I support everyone's rights. That's why I'm here, to make sure that everyone's voice is being heard, and that we try to do the best that we can do to help make sure that our city is safe and people feel safe and comfortable.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks to staff for working on this, both in the Attorney's Office and the Policy Office. Thank you, Commissioner Santos, for bringing this forward. Thank you to everyone who came out to speak on this today, and everyone who has sent emails about this, because we've gotten a lot of emails about it, all positive. At least all the ones I've seen have been positive. Thank you to our police officers who've been, I know this is an issue that comes up with you. The community's been engaged on this in a variety of ways for a long time. I'm glad we're having the discussion, and I hope that there's something we can do to move it forward. I'm sure there's something we can do to move it forward. In thinking about this and in trying to work on it through my own head, there is no medical procedure that I am ever gonna have that somebody's gonna try to keep me from doing. There is no hospital, no doctor's office where I'm gonna find protesters between me and the door, calling my morality into question and trying to keep me from walking in. It just is never gonna happen. I can take my daughters to any manner of doctors and nobody will say a word. But if I ever need to take my kids to Bread and Roses for a procedure, their morality is going to be called into question, and the police are probably going to have to come see me at that point. I was at Office Depot this morning, and there were people standing in the driveway across the street at Bread and Roses with cell phones in their hand, ready to take videos. I don't know if it was clinic day or what it was. I didn't really know anything about it, but everybody in town knows that there are protesters at Bread and Roses consistently. Went into Office Depot, came out, same guys, still standing in the driveway. It very clearly is a problem. We very clearly ought to be moving forward with something. I am very reticent to harm anyone's First Amendment rights. But I don't think, really don't believe, that asking someone to not prevent someone else from getting a medical procedure is harming anyone's First Amendment rights. You can stand across the street, say whatever you want. You still get to protest. You get to do all the things you want to do, but you don't get to impede not only the medical procedure, but business. That's another thing. You're impeding commerce if you're stopping people from walking into somewhere to get a medical procedure. That's another side of it that we haven't talked about. And I'm sure the courts have at some point, but there are a number of things that you're preventing if you're preventing people from getting a medical procedure. Mostly you're preventing them from getting a medical procedure, which is just wrong, in my opinion. Just my opinion. And I understand the other side of the argument. I totally get it. It's been explained to me very loudly many times. The last thing I will say is that as I was talking through this at home this morning with my wife, the last thing she said to me was, are you going to wait until it turns violent before you pass something? Or are you going to wait until it gets violent? And my answer is no. Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Yeah, well, thank you. I don't have as much to add as my colleagues, but this is so very clearly a women's issue. I think that it shows, based on the preponderance of citizens who spoke, looking at the legal precedents, I believe there is enough for us to write an ordinance. And we shouldn't wait for the Supreme Court's cert to begin that process, because who knows how long that will take. And certainly this commission has been willing to write ordinances under the specter of preemption and things being taken from under it in the first place, so that's nothing new for us. And I think we have a duty to the women in this community to show them that, I don't think anyone can possibly argue that it is unreasonable to say, just stay 8 feet away from someone who doesn't want to talk to you. It doesn't get any simpler than that. So I'm in favor of us moving forward with a legal document for it. I think for a case like this, I would probably want to see what the attorney comes up with for how we sort of enter this. The injunction seemed to be the most enforceable manner from a court, so I would defer to legal minds to figure out how that should come about. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm ready to move forward. I think we need to get, we need to do two things. We need to start collecting the evidence to establish a compelling state interest. And I think we do have some past, we have calls, we have responses, and so there is a body of evidence that exists now. We need to continue building that. And then we need to work on that least restrictive language. And I think there's models out there. In the meantime, if the court declines to hear the case, then fantastic. then I think we know what we're able to do. If they do hear the case, we'll just have to see what the outcome of that is and see if ours, is struck down by that or not. But we need to go ahead and move forward. And I don't think we're being asked to choose, but to me, the hard barrier versus a floating barrier is more effective for this situation. 8 feet is still, so Ms. Hoffman, you went through and you talked about a person was prohibited, I think from the Colorado case, that the person was prohibited from verbally attacking or shouting. Then it gets to remedy and having to prove it and all that, which I find a little bit problematic. But if we're able to do a 50-foot buffer, that to me solves the entrance issue, because they're gonna have to be on the other side of the street. That's the closest public right of way, and so you're gonna be able to let people come in and get in and out without being impeded or harassed. And then once they're in the parking lot, then it's a much safer environment. But again, I don't want to I'm not at the point today where I feel like I need to or have to decide what's most appropriate. I'm just thinking, we know that location well and what is likely to work more than others. So, Ms. Hoffman, do you have something you wanted to add, and then we'll go back to Mr. Ray Santos with the motion?
Just that the attorneys in the city of Chicago have offered to connect technical assistance for our team as we explore this. So they're willing to share all of their experiences with whoever moves this forward, if that would be useful.
That's fantastic. Just help me remember to write them thank you. I'll get that mailed off. Commissioner?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a 3-part motion. The first part is to direct the city manager to work with the city attorney to collect data on medical facilities that are having issues with public safety and patient access to health care. The second portion of the motion is to look at existing laws and how they can be improved or better enforced. Third part is after looking at the data collected and current public safety enforcement efforts, have staff come back to the committee with recommendations on buffer zones to better protect our community's safe access to healthcare facilities.
Second. Okay, motion and second. Any further questions?
I just have a question on the second part. Can you repeat that?
To look at existing laws concerning this area and how they can be improved or better enforced.
So in my estimation, I think Bread and Roses has waited like 7 years for this. Do we have a time frame that we're looking at?
I would like it to be sooner than later. I don't know how long. I'm more for the city manager or the city attorney on the amount of data needs to be collected. But one thing that we need to make sure with this is this will be litigated, and we need to make sure that we have a very strong foundation to be able to. So I don't want to unduly rush it, but I also don't want to wait forever to be able to get everything.
Yeah, I don't want us to be at a point where a year later we're saying,
oh yeah, I don't want
okay,
this to be a year later
well,
either.
This is what.
So I don't know if the city manager has how long they think you might need.
Well, so there's going to be 2 types of data. There's the historic stuff. I mean, we can run reports and we know the number of times that we've been called there, correct? And so we can provide that, relatively quickly, right? But then there's going to be the prospective data collection for events that have not yet occurred. And that's really, we're going to need to consult with the city attorney's office on what period of time are we looking at, in what volume is necessary, and also if it's a 30-day window, it's a 30-day window. If it's a 6-month window, it's going to be a 6-month window. I don't know what a period of time is going to be necessary to demonstrate that.
Okay. Are you satisfied with? Not satisfied. Did your question get answered?
No. I think that as you consult with the city attorney and you have your, discussions, that it would be helpful for us to know what this looks like in terms of a time frame. Does that seem reasonable?
Yeah, I think what's being asked is just update the commission as new information becomes available. Okay. And then we'll be able to communicate that to the clinic as well. Pardon?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. in the last week, I've had 3 different people reach out to me saying they had stories that they would like to tell, but they don't want to do it publicly. They're more than willing to write anonymously, but they want it to be taken seriously too. But they absolutely are not going to stand in front of a camera. And if 3 people have reached out to me in a week, there are a whole lot more people with experiences who would be willing to do that. Are we interested? Do we have a mechanism for taking?
Well,
or do we want such a thing?
We'll allow the professionals to do the job, but I mean, sworn affidavits would be fantastic. You know, how much we're able to protect people that want to remain anonymous, I don't know. I don't know if we can protect those under HIPAA or not. So we'll let them figure that. But I think certainly anybody from the clinic or the escorts that are willing to give testimony and a sworn affidavit would be beneficial. They're eyewitnesses. You know, and then particular clients, I mean, that's the more difficult, but I mean, some people may be willing to do that, and if they are, then that will help establish a pattern and a body of evidence that makes our case stronger. So we'll work on that. Okay, any other questions? All right, Mr. Manager, Madam Attorney, got your work cut out for you, but we know that you're up to the task. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. All opposed? That motion passes. Thank you all for being here. Really appreciate it. Oh, we don't allow applause. Sorry. No cheers or cheers. We try to be all neutral and civil, but we appreciate you all being here and giving us your perspective today. You are more than welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting if you'd like. If people would like to go on with their lives, I'm just going to let you sort of clear out, and then we'll get back to our business.
Business minder.
Guess they want us up.
You see what I'll do next? Okay. Someone's going to say it on the Is this okay? Yeah, that's like going to move it on.
Enforcement stuff too, so the GNV We're at that point now. They've already done a lot of the trying to change the stuff.
Yeah. Thanks. Lawsuit okay, we will now recognize Chief Jones, Deputy Chief, Assistant Chief Campus, Chief Inspector. Sorry. Chief Inspector. The 2 chiefs for our quarterly GPD update.
Just a preface,
Sure, Mr. Manager.
One of the items I heard from the commission loud and clearly was you wanted a more focused presentation, so I'd be interested. I'd be interested in your feedback after this presentation, whether we got to your objective or not.
We're pretty shy.
Okay. And not to say that all the information wasn't valuable.
Very valuable.
Too valuable. All right.
A lot of valuable information.
Okay. The highlight. What about the highlight?
Yeah, I've told the chief I've discovered that there's not a word he doesn't like.
He edited for me a lot. Okay, so you're proud of the work that you do, and it shows. Okay, it's been edited. All right, Chief. Sorry.
Yes, sir. Our first slide is our UCR stats to date. Okay. And as you can see, we are.
Actually, I'm sorry, Chief, to interrupt. For the clerk, I have not been able to upload this back up, and actually, I went back to the November meeting because we had a citizen report. I wanted to pull up that, and I couldn't get that one either. So I don't know if it's a problem with how it's being uploaded or. Yeah.
The backup, yeah. The agenda backup.
Yeah, and I'm not going through the website, I'm going through the app. But it's been a, unknown error. So, and it's just DPD, and that's something that we obviously want. Actually, access to, so when people ask, that, you know, when people say crime is skyrocketing, we can share data with them, actual data. All right.
So our crime to date is down 0.44% from this time last year. You can see all the different categories we've gone over before, what we track. Again, UCR is the standard currently, and by the end of this year, I think we'll be converting over to the new standard, and everything will be changing.
The only thing I want to add to that, when you look at crime last year, I think some people were saying we were up, we were down by 9.3%. I do want you all to know, when you look at overall uniform crime in the city of Gainesville, we were literally down by 9.3%.
That was 18 to 19?
Yes, sir.
19, we were down 9.4?
9.3%.
9.3.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Right.
thank you.
Maybe you just want to explain so what year-to-date means.
Yeah, year-to-date is this time, the same time last year compared to the same time this year. Is how these, what you're seeing here is showing you. Again, obviously this was through the 4th of February, so we've had a few days here, and I know we've had some significant incidences that you'll probably see in the news media here shortly that will probably change these numbers a little bit. All right, we have some maps here for you. This is our hotspot maps for homicides for 2019. Is it year-to-date? Who did that? Yes.
2019.
Yeah.
We only had 2
All of 2019, we had 2 homicides, one up in the northwest, which was the Pine Ridge area, and one down in the Duval neighborhood. Next is our hotspot maps for sexual offenses. As we go through some of these, you'll see more the look of measles. They'll get bigger and bigger, but these are all the ones last year.
Can you explain sexual offenses?
I'll defer to our...
I'm going to, I wasn't part of this specific graph, but this, looking at the numbers, it looks like our total UCR for the rape category, which could be adult sexual offenses or child sexual offenses, they get lumped together. We had about 160 last year in the city limits. I want to say it was a little bit down from the year before. But remember, reporting, we want as many people to report as possible. So our reports have gone up year to year for the last 7 or 8 years, which is good. Last year we went down a little bit. I don't think there was any less sexual assault in the city. I'm hoping there was, but because we want to make sure all survivors feel trust towards our agency and want to report.
And UCR is a uniform crime report, so you'll hear us, that's the federal standard, but as he said, we'll go to something else January 21st, January 2021.
George, I put all these slides together, and that's what that is, it's a UCR.
I do have a question.
Yes.
I'm always astounded at our homicide rate. I mean, it is so incredibly low. Is that?
Please knock wood, please.
Please knock wood.
Is that normal for cities of our size, or do we just have a
First of all,
exceptional police department that is that?
I think we got a very caring community, but then secondly, looking at it, we got some bad shots in Gainesville, and also we got an excellent trauma unit. And I'm just being for real. When you start looking at the number of shots fired in this city, we got some bad shots, and we got an excellent trauma unit.
So when you look at some of our surrounding communities like Palaca or Chief
Ocala,
the response rate to the trauma centers. Now, Ocala has 2 trauma centers, but they have a higher per capita rate of homicide and shootings than we do.
Okay, that makes sense.
So,
didn't even look at that.
And Will, when we were working on the project with the other cities, SPAN and St. Louis, Birmingham. I mean, Savannah is a smaller population than us, correct? Or at least they're very close to us.
Comparable, right?
Yeah, and they were almost in triple digits of homicides.
Yes.
You know, the same period we are. Right? I mean, it's pretty much anybody we compare ourselves to. We're way lower than just about.
I always remind the chief, remember what we're talking about.
Yes.
We're talking about crime in Gainesville.
Right.
Yeah, so what drives our numbers are exactly what you're referring to, probably. Car burglaries, things of that nature.
I think a lot of it has to do too with the environment and the makeup of the community. We talked about some of the resources that are available, but also your citizenry and the makeup of your citizenry. So, you know, so when you hear of these drug epidemics, we don't see at the same scale those drug epidemics in our community for a variety of reasons. Look at who lives here. We have a college here. We're college students, and those associates are not getting involved in those highly addictive drugs. I'm not saying we don't have a drug problem. It's just not the same addiction that we see in other communities. When you go down to Ocala, they don't have a major university. They have 2 hospitals. We have 3. So you know, it's more of a blue collar type, and then a lot of retirees. So that's why I say environment. It has a lot of factors go into that as to what you see and you don't see.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, but I mean, all those things said, poverty and violent crime often have a correlation.
Yes.
Most definitely.
And
Most
for
definitely.
whatever reason, you know, we have a community with very high poverty, but we're not losing a lot of people to homicide. But to clarify on that, we're not talking about people who got shot and could have died.
Mhm.
We're talking about
People who actually died.
Right. So because we have that trauma unit, that excellent trauma unit on 13th Street.
Yes. They have saved some lives. And also, and I tell you, when you look at homicides, when you want to look at a pattern, look at the victim and look at the perpetrator. And you're going to see a common denominator in this community, and that's African American. Look at those 2 factors when you begin to look at who are the victims and who are the perpetrators. And you're going to see that, and poverty is going to play a major role in that particular level as well.
So I want to give a plug to some things we've been working on.
Yes.
With some folks in the room right now.
Right.
We've been working hard on Pine Ridge. We're working on it
Oh,
today.
yes.
We had a meeting about it yesterday. We continue to work
Appreciate
on
that.
where one of those homicides was.
Yep.
We've been working hard to try to turn that around. And I think we have some things in place that
Yes, we do.
you all put together
Yes,
that I
we
think
do.
are going to do
It's
that.
going to be part of the presentation.
Excellent.
Yes.
Very, very good. So, but the other thing I want to ask on this particular slide, do we not count what happens on UF campus? Or
We do not. We
Okay.
do not. They are a separate UCR reporting entity, so we don't have those.
So all those homicides on UF campus?
Yeah, no.
Totally bad taste, I'm sorry.
The sporting events don't count, so I'm sorry. Assistant Chief Scott, you had something?
I want to add also, I haven't been at Tallahassee for the last 5 years, and coming here in Tallahassee, I think leads the state per capita with violent crime. The difference is the tolerance of the folks here and the responsiveness. We have not allowed homicides to get to the level that they have in Tallahassee. We don't allow, we respond quickly, and the community demands that we respond quickly and be more effective. Because we have, I think, a better communications with the public. We have better relations with them. And Tallahassee has good relations with the folks and have a lot of programs, but they don't have the integral relationships that we have, and people like frankly, Chief Jones, who have that respect and get that respect from the community, and get that buy-in from the community. And that's the partnership that has been successful for Gainesville. Tallahassee, they're trying to get there, but they're not quite there now. But I noticed that we had a shooting every day. I think we average a shooting every day in Tallahassee, and they're a little better shots than they are.
Yeah, that's what I was telling you about.
I think we
The
were
accuracy.
about 20 homicides and the 19. So 25 homicides.
And part of that is not allowing ourselves to think that that's normal and get desensitized to it.
Exactly.
You're reading about, you know, an attempted homicide every day in the paper, and you're getting 20 or 30 or 100 plus in Savannah a day, you just think it's normal. But we don't, so when it happens, our community very quickly sort of, you know, demands of us, what are you going to do about this? How are we going to fix this? Why did this happen?
Correct.
And that's where we want to stay. I mean, this should not be.
Right.
Correct.
All right, please continue.
I just wanted to make mention about the low number of homicides and to compliment our training division. Lieutenant Dan Stout, about 6 years ago, maybe a little longer, introduced tactical medical kits to all officers that work in patrol. And we have systematically been implementing the use of tourniquets in shooting cases, and they've been implemented so quickly. Both EMS and SHANS have complemented the number of lives that our officers themselves have saved by responding, as the chief said, very quickly but being trained well enough to know how to use the combat gauze that we have, that they use in the military, and the tourniquets, which actually are applied. And the last time we took a number of life saving. Now realize if there's a traffic crash and someone has an interior bleed that's causing a lot of pain, or a life-threatening incident, it also does include those, but it's been well over 60 lives since the implementation of this program.
Wow.
So the officers are out there, they know, they have the skills to be able to do it, and that came from Chief Jones in his initiative. And we've actually partnered with Shands to provide the tourniquet kits, and we've also provided training to all the law enforcement agencies in our county. So we believe in having the officers very well trained, but they've saved many lives involving people who've been shot within our city limits.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Commissioner.
Our next slide is showing where our current sex offenders and predators live in our city. As you know, we have an ordinance in place that regulates where they live. If there are some stars in here that are inside of those areas, it's because they were grandfathered in before the ordinance was put into play. So you can see where they tend to congregate, and some of them are out in the county as well. Our next one is our robberies, where most of our robberies, and so for edification, a robbery is when a person applies force and takes something from another person. So they pull a firearm or something, say, give me what you got, that's a robbery. So that's basically what you see here. Mainly, you can see where they're in the mostly populated areas, the downtown area, and then where a lot of our commerce areas are at. Our aggravated assaults from last year. Now this includes domestics, so that really feeds into this statistic as our aggravated assaults that occurred during a domestic dispute, so they're not all stranger type assaults. Burglaries, this is where it's either occupied or unoccupied, and this is either business or residential. It does not include burglaries to vehicles. Burglary to vehicles under UCR are covered under our theft category. So this is either a house or a business that was broken into in 2019. Our stolen vehicles for 2019.
That does include scooters.
Oh.
Yeah, that includes scooters. And that's Florida definitions.
So what I would say though too, because it does that, the areas in the center core of the city, right off of the campus, right around 13th and University, that's where the majority of our scooters reside anyway. So that's why you see that big lump. The further out you get, are there scooters out their way? Yes, but the probability of a scooter being stolen that far out is not as high. Would you agree?
I can tell you that about 25 to 30% of those dots are scooters, and all the rest of the dots, about up to, I would say, 90, other than scooters, you just take vehicles, 90% of vehicles or even more are with the keys in the car. So there's almost no such thing as
Or the fob, what he was saying, the fob, where they just push the button.
It's hard to steal a car without the key.
Right, but they push the button, they leave a spare fob in the car, and they push the button and they move on. The car is unlocked.
Doesn't mean, we don't want to blame victims.
Yes.
We don't want to fight crime, but
Yes.
keep working on education.
Right.
And
Our next section.
One of the things that drive our stolen vehicle numbers, besides the fact that keys are left in the vehicle, are sometimes people have acquaintances that aren't the most law-abiding, and they'll just literally take the keys off the dining room table and drive off with the vehicle. So as for an actual stranger attempting to hotwire a vehicle, drive off with it, or flatbed it, or something to that effect, those are in such a minority compared to our numbers. I agree.
Next, we're going to give an update on our personnel and recruitment. Assistant Chief Pierce, these are your numbers.
These are my numbers.
These are your numbers.
When it shows total vacant of 17, that does not mean that we are short 17 officers. That means I have 17 positions that are sworn that there's no one currently filling. We have many that are in different phases of training, whether they're in the academy or they're even in the FTO program. They're not, Captain Koenig is on me every day about, I need staffing. We're doing our darndest, but that number at one point was at what, George?
when you almost, or no, we were close to 40.
Yeah,
at one point.
so, we are not having that much of a problem hiring as much as we are as training, because we are really restricted as to how many we can train on the shifts. That's, again, Captain Koenig is on me on that as well, that, listen, you can hire all you want, but I can only train so many at a time, which is correct. So we're trying to break it up to allow the training not to occur once or twice a year, that's more broken up over 4 or 5 times a year. In addition to that, what was I going to say, our focus has been on non-certified, mainly because we're finding a better type of individual that really, really fits in to the Gainesville
Type of
policing that we do. Which is, I will tell you that it is, we police differently here in this city than we do a lot of, that policing is taking place across the country. We're following the chief's 3 C's and a lot of other things that we work on here. It really takes a thinking person to become a Gainesville police officer, not a, if you will, robot that will just follow orders, which we love here. It's fantastic.
I'm looking for problem solvers. Okay, I'm looking, not one that just, I'm about a book and I'm doing that. I'm looking for problem solvers.
So one thing too is some of our folks who left within the last year or so and went over to the West Coast are coming back. So they went over there and went, and they're coming back. So
we will welcome them with open arms.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. And the good thing too is they don't have to be put in training as long as someone that just came out of the academy. So it helps us fill those ranks quicker. We also have a recruitment video we'd like to show you real quick that we're getting ready to put out.
I'm Gainesville Police Chief Tony Young. If you're seeking a rewarding career where you can assist citizens and bring justice to the community, consider joining our team.
The Gainesville Police Department is now hiring sworn police officers. Call Personnel Services at 352-393-7595 or visit the website.
The Gainesville Police Department needs you.
So we just recently, so we just to let you know, we worked with one of our local minority vendors to produce this video, and it's one we're going to start using here shortly. All right, our community-oriented policing, our gang violence task force, Captain Centro.
Towards the end of last year, Commission, really around the holidays, we had a uptick in violence between 2 local youth gangs. One of them calls themselves 4K, and then one of them calls himself 1K. There were several gang shootings, both in the city and the county. We worked together with our ASO partners. And, you know, due to staffing levels, we've had to have our gang unit kind of in and out, have one, not have one. We put together another unit, Sergeant Marquita Brown. Of course, she is the smartest at our agency right now when it comes to youth gang violence. She put a little team together, and literally within 3 weeks, we had all the leaders of those gangs in custody. And once you take what we found, I think Chief will tell you, once you take these leaders off the street, the other kids really don't want to be involved in this. They're just kind of followers sometimes. And substantial result has been a reduction in violence and shooting. So we still have it, we're still working on it, but I don't want to speak for the chief, but I know the chief is not going to allow the gang unit to dissipate again. We're going to buckle down.
I'm sorry.
And we have to have some folks that are focused on youth violence and intervention, you know, and that, you know, you take that proverbial head off the snake, and those violent ones that are kind of pushing these younger kids to do this, once you isolate them, we can have a much better result with the Riker House and other intervention techniques.
I just wanted to jump in on this particular item. I think this is, the gang task force is one of the most important things that we can continue to invest in, because you look at what this commission is trying to do, what the city is trying to do for young people, and for people who neighbors or friends or peers involved in these gangs, this is what we're up against in terms of how they're going to spend their time in the community, who they're going to get to know, and how they're going to grow up. So this is where I think we can make a lot of headway and continue to make sure that we're taking care of these kids. Yes, sir. Thank you. I appreciate all of this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've seen an increase in graffiti tags around the city. Are those gang related?
Some of them are. Matter of fact, Captain Koenig worked with Public Works to begin abating that. Christmas Eve, 12 o'clock in the daytime in the Carroll Estates area, there was a shootout. And we went out and still gave toys, but when we went in the neighborhood, it was all marked up. And one of the first things that I said was, we're going to remove this graffiti because it was kind of accepted at that point. Our neighbors were afraid to come forth and say, look at the stop signs, look at what's on the street. So I know that it's out there. Some of it is attributed to that, sir.
Yeah. And yeah, I do think we should try to clean those up as soon as possible.
Yes.
Trying to clean up the graffiti, letting it fester for a month.
To give credence.
Yes, it does. It does. Yeah. It says it is okay. That's one of the things I don't think.
We've got to shoot for at least a 24-hour.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Do we have an estimate of how many folks were in the 4K and 1K game? Just a brief number.
We actually did a big slide. Pretty smart work with Sergeant Brown put together a slide. 4K is a very large I don't want to even call them an organization, but they're a large group of kids, probably in the 30 to 40 people range. 1K very small. They're in a southeast region that's mostly county jurisdiction, and they were probably in the 10 range. But and don't get me wrong, you could be in 1K one day, and then your cousin joins 4K, and you're like, oh, that looks better over there. We're going to be at 4K. So it's not like you see on TV. It's very fluid. There's some guys that are really on 4K all the way and they flag in this, but most of the other kids could go one way or the other depending on what group their friends are part of. So, but no, 4K's probably been around 2 or 3 years now, and just kind of different iterations of it. And now there's a 3K. Now I heard there's a 5K out in the middle schoolers out off of Tower Road and Canapolis area. So we just got to stay on top of it. And, you know, when we start hearing about it, we go talk to them, we see who the kids are, try to figure out. And then if you've been to our JBATS meeting, you know that we try to intervene immediately. And even the leaders, we try to intervene and try to get them help. But sometimes they don't want it, they're resistant, and they keep committing crimes. But and the chief's made it very clear, once you cross that line into violence, of firearm violence, you're not, your second chances get very limited at that point.
And I want to add something too, Chief, that I think you guys did a great job is taking that gang unit to the community meetings and letting the residents know what to look for as it relates to gang activity. What's the common the commonalities between gang members in the community, because you have elderly folks that just don't know, and so you're getting the attention of the residents so they can call, and I think that was a wonderful idea that you guys did, and you just go out and you let the residents know this is what you need to look for in your community.
We're planning to do it again with the sheriff department.
Yeah.
We had a meeting and we're planning, because not only you saying the residents of the community, parents.
Right.
What is a parent when your child come home and they got this book bag all marked up or something like that? What do you need to look for as a parent? So we're in the planning stages right now. They wanted to just deal with this situation now, but you'll see that coming.
It was effective because a lot of people didn't know.
Yes,
so
exactly.
Brought it to the community.
Exactly. So we are planning that.
Okay, our next item is drones, and I'll preface it's not on the slide, but if you're not aware, there is Florida state law that regulates how law enforcement utilizes drones. It's very, very restrictive. In many cases, we need a search warrant in order to use a drone, but there are circumstances in which we can use it, most of which being emergent situations. So as you see here, and Captain Centric will kind of go over, our SWAT team is testing this out because they would potentially use this during a call-out situation and what the law would allow them to use it for. So Captain Centric.
So drones are incredible technology. Lots of agencies are using them. There's some debate within the legal community inside Florida when you can use them and when you can't. We're pretty restrictive here in Gainesville, and that's how we plan to stay. But the drone we're talking about is only about this big, that DJI Mavic 2. It's an industry standard. It only costs about $4,000. And ultimately, I mean, for missing persons, they're great to apprehend violent offenders who are fleeing on foot. They would be excellent use along with a canine or something like that. Search warrants for a SWAT team. Our SWAT team bought a smaller one that's about this big. That, think about it, as opposed to trying to go into a house and get a bad guy out, that creates a very volatile situation. Whether they have a gun or we don't know if they have a gun, very dangerous, right? We use a robot now mostly to go in to see if they're there, but a drone gives us one more capability, because once we know they're there, now we can get better directions. It's not a surprise. It's not a surprise for them, and mostly it's not a surprise for us, just to keep the officers safe. But if we're safe, we're less likely to shoot back. And we don't ever, our SWAT team, somebody knock on wood for me, has not had an officer-involved shooting in as long as I can remember. So it's been a long time, but we want to keep it that way. So drones give you some capability that way. So I think it's something we build towards. Right now, we're just in a testing and evaluation stage. We have bought one. Our current one of our pilots is testing it. And but we'd like to see what it can do, staying within the parameters of the law. And moving forward, I think it has some great capability and opportunity.
And just to emphasize, the reason why the pilot is doing it is you have to be licensed through the FAA in order to operate a drone, and they're already under their licensing as a pilot license to do that.
Well, you have to get a separate one.
A separate
commercial drone license. Not super difficult, but you do have to have it.
And just to give you a heads up of one item that will be coming to you in March. So the sheriff and I have had a discussion about the continuation of the city's involvement in the sheriff's aviation unit. So I'm not sure if you're aware, but we currently pay roughly half of the cost and have two officers, sworn officers, that are devoted to that and use law enforcement trust fund money to deal with the maintenance of the helicopter, and our own helicopter that we own was grounded.
It's damaged in a training exercise to where we it's unrepairable. Yes.
So, my thought is twofold. One is, we can probably get much better bang for our buck rather than using drones when we need aviation support. But the second really comes, why, if tax dollars that are generated within Gainesville or paid to the county are being used to pay for this service, and then we're putting our own municipal resources into it, no other city is being asked to support the aviation unit. Why is it really our burden to do that for a service that could, flies half the time outside the city? So that's the policy question that we're going to ask the commission to grapple with in March, as to whether we should invest in another helicopter and the maintenance and the staff, or go the route of drones for that type of aviation support that we need. My opinion is it's easier to pop a drone out of the back of the trunk or back of a vehicle and get it airborne versus hoping that there are pilots and get the unit available at the airport to launch. So.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And on that, are there any other cities in the state of Florida who do kind of fund? It's all mainly through all counties funded, is that correct?
That's my understanding. There may be, Tampa may have an arrangement with Hillsborough County,
But currently how the funding is set up, the sheriff is using not their MS and TSU, or I forgot what the exact, but they're using their general fund balance on that. So in essence, the Gainesville residents are being taxed twice.
MSTU.
MSTU, sorry.
And my question is, I don't know if she really identifies the funds she used to fund that. She may, but I know that always is a question as to what MSTU funds are going to which units, et cetera.
On the drone usage and the search warrants being needed, is it a height issue? Like, if you're over 1,000 feet, you don't need a search warrant, or is it just it's police usage at all, even if you're 10,000 feet up or 10 feet up?
It depends. It depends. If you're in an emergency situation, like somebody fleeing, violent offender who's escaped or on the run, you can use a drone without a search warrant. A missing person, you don't need a search warrant. But if you're using it you can't use it to surveil a house without a search warrant. If we wanted to put a drone in a house, even in a SWAT type situation, you'd have to have a search warrant first. If you want to put a drone above a house, you'd have to have a search warrant first. So in those
Well,
situations.
even in the common areas too, you wouldn't be able to launch it unless there's some kind of predicate incident to warrant it going up. So like a football game, you can't just monitor the crowd with a drone.
You can't use
Not unless
law
they,
enforcement drone.
not a law enforcement drone. Fire rescue can do it,
Yeah.
but we cannot, we specifically cannot by statute.
GPD can't control it.
We can't even stand next to them and say, hey, move that drone over there to see whatever, because anything that's captured would be considered a violation and would be thrown out in court.
Okay.
State legislature enacted that, sir.
And I will tell you that legislation went through last year, didn't pass to expand the usage of drones because they see the value of it. Florida Sheriff's Association, and I think Florida Chiefs too, is pushing to maybe modify it just a little bit to, we understand the privacy issues, but just to expand like the large gatherings like that. We couldn't even use it during the Spencer event, which, you know, you would think that's a time when you want to have some type of eye in the sky, right?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question was going to be exactly that. During states of emergencies, would we be able to?
Absolutely, yes, for damage assessment.
Damage
for,
assessment, stuff like that.
emergencies type like
Spencer.
a tornado or collapsed building, absolutely, you would use it. You'd be able to use it in that situation.
No, but when the state of emergency was Spencer, no, we could not.
Yeah, if we declare it a state of emergency because of a crowd situation, that's not
So
specific
again,
in the
that's like a
statute.
Homeland Security designated event, like the Super Bowl or something like that.
Right. But keep moving.
All right.
Keep moving. We got no time in here.
You didn't take into account the commission.
Yeah, I know, you didn't take that.
We want to bring you up on the Pine Ridge Peace Initiative, and that's going to be presented by Mr. Woody, who's pointing to Assistant Chief.
The initiative for Pine Ridge is really the start of what we want to do as far as community-oriented policing. We're going back to the integration of police officers in the community. And what we want to do is work in concert with the community to identify the problems and come up with solutions. And we're basing this in part on the Birmingham Project, which is based in part on the cure violence type concept, and basically treating crime as not just a symptom, but a disease. And we keep treating the symptom by making arrests, and we never really get to what's causing the actual crime to be committed. So the approach that we have is multifaceted, and what we talked about, quite frankly, is developing a list of resources and using the list of resources that we have in this community to deal with such things as substance abuse, to deal with unemployment, to deal with mental health, to deal with all those things which cause people to commit crimes. So what our plan is to come up with a letter. We're going to identify those people in those areas that are causing issues. We're going, and this is a part of the scheme that we have right now. We're going to have John Alexander and his group go in, make contact. We may send officers with them when needed. But make contact with the folks in there. We're going to knock on the door and say, we know that you're actively involved in criminal activity. We're going to give them a letter. We're going to try to encourage them to take the availability of services that we provide and to utilize those services to avoid incarceration or reincarceration. So we're literally going to knock on the door, talk to them, and offer them an alternative. But we're also going to say to them, if you fail to take advantage of this, we're going to do our best to lock you up, to remove you, to stop you from doing what you're doing. So please take this job, take this assistance with mental health, and really have that one-on-one conversation to let them know, we know you're doing it. we're trying to help you to prevent recidivism or to really get involved in it. We already had on January 13th, they did a walkthrough. They did it with Commissioner Ward, and Commissioner Ward has been excellent in helping us out with this, and he has an initiative in dealing with the landlords out there, which is another part of the issue that we're dealing with, because our plan is to hold the landlords accountable. You know, to make them, and anyone that tells you, and this is the thing why Gainesville is great, is because GPD didn't solve this problem. They're not solving any problem by themselves. As a community, we can. And that's what we're trying to make sure that the community understands. Don't wait on us to solve it, but working together, we can solve this. And so we've already started the commission walkthrough with, I think, Captain Owens. They solved some of the problems in the area. On the 22nd, we discussed the upcoming implementation of the initiative for the Police Advisory Council. District 2 meeting we addressed with Commissioner Ward. We met with Commissioner Ward, quite frankly, a little while ago and talked with him about some of the things that we had planned for that area. And we want to make sure that there was a good understanding of what we were doing, so that when he spoke to the community, because he goes out there, and we want to make sure that he has a full understanding of what our intentions are and what our approach is going to be. We have contact with the homeowners association regarding cleanup of the overgrown areas. We meet with the probation and parole folks regarding juvenile and adult probationary. And really we just kind of identify the people with issues like that, and we're trying to help them. And that's the thing, that's the little different approach I think that we're looking at for community policing. It's not about locking people up and getting them in jail. It's about resolving the problems, stopping them from doing what they're doing. You know, I grew up in Liberty City, in Miami, Florida, and through God's grace, I ended up here. Those kids have that same opportunity if we give them a helping hand, and that's what we're trying to do. Currently, compiling a list of resources, and John has been great with that. And what we mean by resources is one thing if I tell you, hey, contact Meridian, they'll give you help. Our folks, when they knock on your door, they're going to be able to pick telephone, call and say, I have this person that's here now. And they're going to speak with a particular contact at Meridian, at these other service providers, and put them in contact with those individuals. So it's personalized service. We're trying our best to avoid having to arrest these folks in the future, to help them become productive citizens. And John's compiling that list in all those areas, dealing with everything, again, from mental health to employment to, you name it as far as those things. The necessities of life, do they need a bill? Do they need a pastor or a rabbi? All of that stuff is going to come into play for us. We will continue to meet with the homeowners and to facilitate better communications. Quite frankly, the folks that are in that area, if we don't get them on board, we don't win their hearts and minds, I don't care how much might, how many officers we put there, we won't be successful. The U.S. military is the most powerful organization in the world. They go in, they can conquer an army, but unless they get the citizens to come on, we lose it, we lose ground again. Same concept here is going in, making sure that we meet with these folks, and there's a good understanding of what our plans are. We have to let them have input into identifying the problem, let them have input to developing the solution. And once they do that, they'll work with us as far as implementing it, and we'll be successful in addressing those issues together. Okay. That's just the start of it. We're going to do that citywide.
Yeah, we'd like to, let me reiterate one of the most important part. I was one of the persons that went to Birmingham and looked at their approach. And one of the most important things that I got from the whole session that we attended was the holistic approach. Like the assistant chief said, dealing with education, dealing with housing, dealing with a lot of the issues that's in the community, family issues, those wraparound services. Patrol's going to do their part, and we're going to come in with a community standpoint part, where we're talking to the ministers, and we're trying to pull them in on the problem. Not to go in and come from the police department and say, we know what the problem is, and we're going to tell you how to fix it. We're gonna pull the community in and have them participate with us, gonna do surveys, find out what is really the problem. And we're gonna take the Pine Ridge, and I think the chief wanna go from neighborhood to district, to we deal with the problem. And one of the things that the coordinator job is gonna be very important. That person need to be in Howard. When they come down, there's some issues that we need to address. He need to be able to address those issues because, for example, I've already had conversations with probation and parole, talking about the young men and women or men and women that's under supervision and dealing with those issues. And you get one chance to convince and get them involved, and we're going to take that approach.
Thank you, Mr. Woody. Any questions before we move to the next topic? I know we're on a timeline. Go ahead.
This man keep looking at me over here.
We believe you.
I'm gonna have to start swinging the gavel here.
This man keep looking at me over here now.
While we're talking about this particular thing, I am so appreciative of everything GPD has put together on this. I think it's going to work. I think it is a program that I think will change lives in Pine Ridge, but it's going to have to be more than just GPD. We're going to need codes enforcement involved in this in a very real way. Landlords who are not serious about offering a decent place to live in Pine Ridge need to be held accountable. Several of us met with a few of the landlords and property owners association earlier this afternoon, and I think we had a good start on that. They still, you know, they're
being diplomatic.
Already, not all of them are ready. There are 55 owners in Pine Ridge. 55 for 112 units. Wow. Yeah. Some of them are doing well, doing the right thing. Some of the people who live in Pine Ridge want to be a part of the solution. What I need, what all of us need is for us to figure out who wants to be a part of the solution, who is benefiting from the problem, and use the people who want to be a part of the solution to help move the people who are benefiting on down the road somewhere. And there are lots of different kinds of folks benefiting from the problem. It's not, we're not going to blame people who are just visiting or, you know, bad apples among the residents. We're also going to make sure that the property owners who are benefiting from there being a problem are part of the solution too. So there are lots of great volunteers. The mayor's mother is one of them who comes in and tries to be helpful. And we need to make sure that those volunteers from around the community and the people who are living in Pine Ridge who are trying to do better have an opportunity to be successful in this. But it's going to require lots of city services. Animal Services was with us from the county on the last walk. We had somebody from Parks. We had folks from Codes. That's going to be a key, is having Codes involved in this as well. Another key to this is going to be mobility. You know, there's a bus that goes through there, but it doesn't do any good really because it takes you somewhere way down the road. It doesn't get you across the street to the park, which is the whole, you know, not the whole thing, but a lot of it. If you can get a bus that will get you just a quarter of a mile walk to Walmart or a quarter of a mile across 34th Street to the park or to the senior center, again, that changes lives. And that's something we can implement with these zones, the first mile, last mile zones. We can change lives pretty darn quickly if we bring all these pieces to bear. If we leave a few of the pieces out and say, well, it's all GPD's problem, it's not going to work. But if we do every service that the city can offer and is kind of sort of offering right now in that neighborhood and really focus, we can change those lives, and then we can replicate that in other parts of the city. You know, we can take it to Phoenix, and we can take it to other similarly isolated pockets of poverty and fix it. I really believe that that's possible. I'm excited about what's going on there. GPD is a huge part of it, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On the codes enforcement angle, the original housing ordinance that hopefully we'll get very shortly, both the good and bad thing is that Phoenix and also Pine Ridge are condominiumized, so it means that those aren't preempted by the state. So our rental housing ordinance will give us some teeth to actually be able to force the landlords to clean up their places. So it's another kind of tool that we could have. Mr. Mayor.
All right.
Made our deflection program update. We're doing interviews for 14 applicants. The interviews should be done when?
They'll be done by the end of this month.
End of this month, and then hopefully a month from there, we'll have somebody in place to start the program. Any other
Yeah,
updates?
so that's just kind of the long game. We've been working on this since 2017. But just real quickly, I think that's a nice sort of segue into what Chief Scott was talking about in terms of what services are needed for some folks that we encounter through deflection, mental health, substance abuse, and some misdemeanor exceptions. So I think it's going to work hand in glove with the co-responder team as well that's out there, with Meridian and the officer. So we're excited.
Okay, in less than 30 seconds, the Angel Shot program.
Angel Shot program. So this is an interesting program. I'm going to we'll talk about what the program is and then the first steps towards implementation.
I know we're in time. They've already seen a presentation on it, the last one, correct, as to what it was. They just need an update of where we're at.
Okay, so we are starting to begin conversations with bars themselves, the big bars. We have one bar owner that owns 10 or 12 different bars around town. So if we figure if we can get their buy-in, because this is a volunteer program, it's more of a marketing endeavor. We have to sell it to the bars. So we're working with the marketing department of the city. I've already talked to their head, and we're going to try to make something that looks really sharp to put out to the bars. We're already taking language from the bars to try to see what language is acceptable for the bars, because if you start using some language in the billboards that talks specifically about sexual assault, sexual violence, they start shying away from it because that could be problematic for their customer base. So we're trying to compromise on what the language will look like. We want at the end of it to be something that the city would put its logo on and say, we endorse this. So we're working with the bars. Once we have something that everybody seems to be okay with, or that the bars seem to be okay with, we'll get the bigger bars to put it out there and do some training with them, and then try to work out from there. There's a whole network of these bars to communicate through. And it's behind the scenes of what we do, so we need to try to work with them and get them to push this thing out. If we try to push it on them ourselves, they may push back, because it's a volunteer thing. Again, they don't have to participate in it, so we have to be careful about how we move forward.
And I think since the last time we approached UF, they're all a go with it, and also the chamber
and Santa Fe.
And Santa Fe, so they're all on board. This is another graphic from that. What? The next slide. All right, the credible violence interrupters.
Yeah, this is to give you a preliminary thing. When we talk about the shootings and violence within Gainesville, we only had 2 homicides, many shots fired. I think in 1 week and 1 30-day period, we had up to like 52 reported shootings within this community. And we know that a lot of it involved kids, but a lot of it involved young adults as well. So I looked around the country, particularly when I went up to Birmingham. We looked at what can we do to interrupt some of this. And so what I did was kind of took what Chicago and some of the other cities had, and I kind of adapted it to Gainesville. So what I have, we have contracted with the Black on Black Crime Task Force. We're going to hire 1.5 individuals to assist in disrupting violence within this community. These in Gainesville and providing street social services to those who are vulnerable to be victims or perpetrators of violence. They're going to be mediators. They're going to come out before we get to gunshots. If they hear it, they're going to be out there in selected communities. Next one. Okay, their job duties is to detect and interrupt potential violent conflicts with trained violence. I can tell you right now, we've hired, the Black on Black has hired 2 of them. They've been in training for probably the last 30 days, and they will hit the work, they will hit the street somewhere in March. The disruptor outreach workers will work to prevent shootings by identifying and mediating potential lethal disputes in the community and following up to ensure that conflicts don't happen. They'll do case management. Workers develop caseloads of clients whom they will serve. Their duties is to, and I'm just going through it for time's sake, is to prevent retaliations, because we know a lot of these shootings or fights or whatever is retaliatory. Whenever a shooting happens, they will immediately work in the community to reduce the emotions. They are trained culturally and appropriate to work with the highest risk individuals to assist them in being less likely to commit violence by working with them. And they're also going to offer social services, job training, referring them to job training, drug treatment, as well as counseling. And that's a little bit more about their job duties. The other thing that they're going to do is work with the community, mobilize community for change. They'll respond to shootings not at the scene, but afterwards. When there is a shooting, generally, if we don't move quick, there will be a response, and so they're going to try to mediate that, and they're going to work with existing community infrastructure within the community.
Excellent, Chief, and that dovetails excellently with our next item, which it really does. I mean, it's very similar to.
Yes, very similar. I read their item, very similar. But we kind of took what they did and we adapted it to Gainesville.
Right. Thank you.
Okay.
That concludes our presentation.
That's it.
All right, excellent. Any questions? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the I think this was brought up last time by Commissioner Johnson, the last tactical briefing on kind of perp walks, and then to that same kind of where we are with that, and that same kind of frame, mugshots from people who are arrested and they're not found guilty are automatically put up, I believe, with the clerk's office. An API is already sent out there, and it is a public record, but we make it very, very easy to get out there, and it's forever done. And a lot of people get arrested, and then the charges are dropped and things like that, but their kind of life is almost ruined at that point. So I guess on those two, kind of on the perp walk-in, and then your thoughts on the mugshots kind of being automatically released by the clerk.
Okay, on the perp walk, the ones that I authorized, I'll give you the last one on Northeast 8th Avenue, the shooting. We had already heard that the citizens were doing their own investigation. And when I say doing their own investigation, they were ready to confront and kill who they thought were the perpetrator. So you have to send a message, a reassuring message out to the community that we have identified, and that case is still open, but I'll just tell you we have identified a suspect, and that suspect is taken into custody. So when we engage in something like that, it's a reassuring and a safety thing to it. Now, when you get the mugshot, that's the clerk of the courts. They access the jail photos or whatever the case, and they put that out at that particular time.
So in terms of when there's I don't know if it's a better term than the perp walk term, but
if you're showing the community.
Yeah. So is that a decision that you as a chief make, or is that something that else is done? And
I authorized that
you're the one who
because
authorized.
I knew that our intelligence were saying that there were some hurt people within the community and that they were looking for the perpetrators themselves, and if they found the person who did the crime, it would have probably been another homicide in this community.
And I guess the policy that we have now, does it go up to you have to authorize being able to do it or not, or what's the current policy on doing it?
There's nothing in our policy that prohibits it, but our practice is it's not a routine thing that we do. And this is something else I'll say too. In the press releases that you'll see, and the most recent one that was done by me, giving them an indication of when we anticipate the person being transported. Not a guarantee it's going to happen. Things happen all the time. Sometimes the interviews run longer. Whether the news media wants to sit around and wait on it or not, we do not film it individually and then release it. But the point I'll make though, and if you see the perp walks from a lot of other jurisdictions, because I've talked to the statewide folks on this, most of the time it's the jail or the facility where they're getting booked into where they'll allow the news media to set up and show them getting walked into the jail, which is nothing that we have control over. So if our local news media becomes wise and either A, sets up for that, or B, requests the surveillance video inside the Sally Port while that person's being taken out of the car and into the jail, they're going to get it and show it out there anyway. Our policy when it comes to video that we have access to, we do not release to the public unless there's a direct public interest in getting it out there. So if we have body-worn camera or in-car camera and it's a case where we've made a charge and it's an ongoing criminal investigation, we do not release that until the state attorney's office gives us the go-ahead to do it, because they need to have the opportunity to view it before that's released to the public and they go to trial on it. If it's something that's of public interest, like a missing person or a silver alert or something like that, then we may go ahead and release stuff like that in the interest of the public to try to identify the individuals, et cetera, et cetera. But as you know, the public records law in Florida is extremely broad. And so there's a lot of things that they ask us for directly that we don't want to release, but we have to under the law. And so I sense from your questioning, your wish is that that doesn't come out, but if they make the request, and if I don't give it to them, they're going to request it from me because they know they can. So if I don't give them some of those things, there's going to be a follow-up request come right behind that. And so I also have to have a good relationship with the media too, because if they feel like they're pulling teeth every single time trying to ask for something, then they're not going to work with me on things when we have a common interest. And usually I see that with some of our student reporters. Sometimes they don't know what to ask for, and I try to help them along. If I don't, then they think I'm just not trying to give them anything, and then some of the articles that come out the way they do because they think I'm trying to be argumentative with them. So, yeah, so if it's something that they know that they're going to get by a public records request, if I say, well, do you have that? Well, send me a public records request, and then, that back and forth starts occurring.
And on the mugshots, I'm not all sunshine. It's more on the mugshots being automatically just within seconds. I don't know how often, but it's very quickly they are put out and they are put out there. The websites it's automatically all be doing that. Sure, if a reporter calls you and wants a mugshot, we have to give that. I think that's different than when it gets disseminated to the universe and now forever is on a public service.
But we don't do that.
No, I know, but I'm saying, but maybe
they
something
tie
that
it
we
to
should
the
ask
jail.
of the clerk in the court to stop using their API. I'd like to get more information about it, and I'll talk to the clerk court, but I just wanted to bring that up as one of the things, because I think we should.
There are companies that make money off of that. They do a public record request, which can't be denied.
Yes.
They automatically populate that. That's automatic. I mean, that's something we have nothing to do with. It's strictly a public record request through the jail, and they do that automatically. All over the country, not just here at home.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Public records request is not an immediate thing, I mean, it doesn't have to be.
It can be. If we get a record request, as quickly as we can provide it, we're supposed to do it. If we can, so when they have it computerized, and it's just the point of pushing a button, they have to provide it. If someone walked into the front desk and sent out a public record request or something, as long as it takes us to actually successfully pull it up and provide it, that's how long we have.
And it doesn't need redaction.
So
the only thing that would slow it down was to review it for redaction, then redact it and send it out.
So the public purpose to make them money is not a public purpose?
No.
No.
I want to be super clear about that. We do not have there's no public interest and no public obligation to make somebody a profit.
No, and they make the money off of the
Well,
websites.
yeah,
but there's a whole other system, well, that's the way the system is set up.
Right.
They can make the public record request, and then they make that, and everyone jumps on there to see who was arrested, and they throw out these advertisements and the whole deal.
Yeah. So I get how the system works. What I'm interested in is finding out how to change the way that works. And I think that's I don't think I'm the only one looking for that, but profiting off somebody else's misery when they have not been convicted of anything, pretty low.
So I think your solution would be at the legislature in Tallahassee, the modification of chapter 119.
Right, but given what we know, we need to look for other solutions.
Just my experience tells you that that's probably the only avenue that you have.
I'm willing to be creative.
Okay, I have one other thing that we're not prepared to discuss today, but perhaps for our next quarterly briefing.
Yes, sir.
The last meeting I asked about I asked for an update, and Chief Campos was prepared to, and responded to the questions we were getting about our use of the ring data. And then since then, the information came out about the facial recognition software. We get a lot of questions about the use of technology. It's a space that I don't feel completely confident talking about, because I'm old. I just don't understand it the way that younger people do. So I understand that technology will continue to be a force multiplier and will continue to be incorporated into what we do. The conversation about the drone is an example of that. We need to be able to assure our neighbors that there is not the potential for misuse of that technology, that basic privacy rights are being protected. And so to that end, what would be most helpful for us, I believe, is if there was a clear usage policy statement. That's what we're working on. That if people ask us about it, we can just pull it up, post it, share it. Now there were some other questions, and this is like, I think that the commission needs to be looped in on this conversation about the specific technology and whether it worked effectively for all hues of skin color and other things like that. Again, I don't know. And the person who was doing this worked in that space, like she understood this. I mean, she was in software and that sort of thing. So we just need to be able to answer those questions and make sure that any concerns we have are addressed. But more importantly, I think people just want to know where does their privacy begin and end, and what are the sort of firewalls for this technology not being misused. Whether by somebody within the organization or somebody that gains outside access. And so I'm just asking if, it sounds like Chief, you said you're working on that, if we can be prepared to discuss that at our next quarterly meeting, then, I think we'll all feel a lot better about it. Harvey and then you got a Wi-Fi issue, so
We had a pretty extensive
Speaking of
discussion
technology.
at Digital Access,
Okay.
really extensive discussion, and then they're gonna bring back the report to that in April.
to digital access?
Yeah.
Okay, well then either get it on general policy or get it on the commission agenda, because the rest of the commission needs to know and
So
understand that.
just
Yeah,
to clarify,
I think
we're
they
going to
have-
bring back the.
So let me tell you what we're bringing back to digital access, and certainly we can bring it back to GPC or whichever other forum we want. So we're bringing back two initiatives. One is we're developing a policy specifically on facial recognition. I think we have sufficient policies on everything else. The other thing, and this speaks, I think, more directly to your point, Mayor, is we are going to be developing for our webpage. Basically, if you're familiar with the web pages, you'll generally see a privacy policy on there. I want to develop a spot where you can click to see what our technology use policy is with regard to use of David, of faces, use of all these different tools that we went through with the Digital Access Committee on there. So it's clear to our neighbors exactly what we're using and how we're using it. So that we're very transparent in that. So that's what we're working on. We'll be bringing that back.
Because obviously in the absence of that, people fill in the blanks with whatever their worldview is. And that just creates a lot of competing narratives out there that's counterproductive to what we're trying to do. So, okay, I'll look forward to that then. Thank you for being, and I didn't realize you had the discussion, so I'm thankful to the committee for already taking that off. Okay, any other questions before we get on to our next item? Go ahead.
One, last time, I believe there was a direction from the commission to look at what kind of policies can bring cannabis arrests down to zero, including not just being arrested in sole possession, but a lot of times those are added on charges. I'm wondering if you have any policies to come back on that, on the GPD could enact to try to reduce that down to zero.
I think we got some numbers that we have recently.
So we actually looked at 2019 for the statistics that were just solely physical arrests for possession of cannabis under 20 grams, and where we only charged possession of cannabis under 20 grams. And for all of the arrests, we only had 3. Each of those cases, one of them was a traffic stop, the other 2 were investigations that we went on, a trespassing investigation, a disturbance investigation, and the cannabis came out of those 2 investigations. The other arrests that we had that would be related to cannabis, we also had 3 separate arrests for possession of paraphernalia, but that's it for the entire year. And if we were to look at years prior to what we have now, we have a significant, I mean, it's almost to the point of a 0 reduction, when I can say 3. The state attorney's office, as when we presented at the last tactical briefing, we did present Bill Cervone's letter, talked about, the difficulties of the low THC versus, presenting a testing alternative and stuff like that. But currently there is no policy which would guide us to say that we would have a reduction to 0, because according to Florida state statutes at this point, possession of marijuana is still illegal. And as the department, being in that guise, we are guided by Florida state statute as what we can and cannot do in terms of that.
But we do internally look at those types of arrests to see what is going on in those situations. In our stratified meetings and other meetings, if you've ever sent through them, you'll see that we focus on certain individuals who are terrorizing our neighborhood. And if we come into contact with that individual and the only thing we have on them is a criminal charge of a misdemeanor amount of marijuana, in order to get that person off the street because of their ongoing conduct, that may be the only charge they're charged with, and taken to the jail. But as Captain Koenig just mentioned, there was only 3 of those arrests last year.
For the entire year.
For the entire year. So all of the other less than 20 grams of cannabis charges that all resulted in some other type of investigation where they were found to be in possession of that at the same time. That is, not only is it still illegal, but it is contraband, and under Florida law, we're mandated to seize and put into evidence and then disposed of under the Florida guidelines and the state law. So it's not something that we can just disregard when we come across it, because we have to seize any and all contraband we come into contact with. So they're going to get additionally charged with that charge at that particular moment in time, and the state will then determine whether they're going to go forward with the charge or not.
So the 3 cases, one, we actually got a firearm off the street. The gentleman first claimed it was his, then recanted and said it wasn't his. So that's, he got the possession of cannabis charge. Another one was a chronic trespassing, where the business had called us over and over again and the person was back. And that's how we ended up with that. And the third was a disturbance between 2 people where, someone had called it in. And so they're all preempted by and I don't want to say non-proactive policing, but policing that's reactive in nature. So.
And I'm glad we're getting lower and lower, but I also think it's, even if we're adding on charges, when, yes, they may have it, and they may have got charged with burglary, and then that's just one extra charge, I think those still are arrests or even notices to appear for cannabis. And I personally want us to move in a direction of not making those charges as well. Thank you.
David, you had something to give.
I think it may have been answered by the rest of the comments, but I just want to be sure that I'm understanding that there's an equitable policy for how we enforce this law, that we're not discretionary deciding who we're going to charge and who we're not going to charge.
No, we got, Paul, it's up to the officer's discretion, and like she was saying, if you're looking, she gave you the 3 instances right there. One was a gun, one was trespassing, so they're giving you that. It's officer's discretion as to who they're going to charge or whatever, but there's other circumstances. But when you look at it, only 3 cases of just marijuana alone, going back throughout the years, that's unheard of. And so I think the officers are using discretion. The other thing that you see coming up is the deflection program. That will be another tool that will be on the officer's belt. Now, I'm not gonna tell you 100% that it's gonna be there, but we're giving the officers tools to give them opportunities to get help. The thing that we're just putting up there on the board about the disruptors program. We're gonna have all kind of tools for our officers, and I'll go back to what I said earlier. I'm looking for problem solvers. I'm looking for problem solvers to be police officers.
To your point, Commissioner, Captain Koenig, how many of those, I think there was 188 or 178 marijuana arrests last year, how many were sworn complaints and how many were notice to appears?
So inclusive, we had 58 total, 3 arrests, 41 notice to appears, 8 sworn complaints, and another 6 sworn complaints leading to arrest. So it would be 14 sworn complaints, 41 NTAs, 14 sworn complaints, and
So
3
the
arrests.
point I want to make, Commissioner, is the decision whether to physically arrest and take to the jail versus still charge them in the method of a notice to appear, which is a ticket with whether they go into the diversion program at the state attorney's office or actually have to appear in court, is up to the state. So they're indiscriminately charging, but the decision to physically take them and put them in the jail is sometimes predicated by the overall activity that the individual is involved in over time. So there are folks that we are actively trying to get off the street because they are involved in so many things. We're trying to stop the bleeding per se and take them off the street. Sometimes those minor offenses is a tool that we'll use to temporarily get them out of there and start getting them in the system so we can put sanctions on them to try and regulate what they're doing, whether it's monitoring by the court or something along those lines.
So in the event that, just playing devil's advocate, so in the event that you have someone who, has a record, and then this is the activity that we have found them to be in criminal possession of, they are given a certain level of discretion to be arrested for crimes that they may commit in the future, to get them off the street?
No. Not somebody who has a criminal history, sir. Somebody who is actively engaged in a short time span where they are getting in fights with people, breaking into businesses, getting into armed disturbances. We come into contact with them because over the last 2 or 3 months, and maybe you can explain it better than me, but there's people that we know that are actively a gang member who's a leader of a gang who's actively thwarting us and or engaged in fights. We come across them, and the only charge we have on them is possession less than 20. They're probably going to get charged so that we can get them off the street and have a little better control over their activity.
There's actually a nexus to criminal behavior with some of the folks that are engaged in the activity of narcotic. Violent crime particularly follows a lot of the people that are selling narcotics.
I understand all this. I guess Mr. Mayor, we had this discussion on digital access committee about facial recognition, and the ultimate question is, to me, which is how do you determine what someone will or will not do in the future based on, you know what I mean?
To put it in a layman's term, or the way I perceive this, if we're looking for somebody because we know them to be the leader of 4K, and 4K has been causing problems, and we encounter that individual, and the only thing they have on them is marijuana, okay, they're going to, go for the ride because we've got enough to know that they are, the leader of a gang unit, and we've got to get them off. So it's not based upon what in the future they're going to do, it's what we know they've done in the past.
Commissioner, I can tell you this.
But I hear you disagree, but I hear you.
Sometimes, like you say, the cocaine member or the one that is doing that, I can get them the help that they need to come back and be a productive citizen. I had to do that last year with a recommendation of a juvenile. I knew if I left this juvenile in Gainesville, this was felonies that this juvenile was doing, And there's a reason why, I won't say it publicly, why he was doing what he was doing. But I knew this child need help, and as long as we left him out in the community, he was gonna continue to commit crimes. I'm happy to report right now, he's getting the help he should have got 5 or 6 years ago. And I think the commissioner knows what I'm talking about. He is getting the help that everybody else turn their head about and just say, oh, he's just a bad child, just let him go on and go on. This kid would have probably ended up in the Department of Correction. Okay, so the judge asked me what was my recommendation. It hurt me to say he needs to be put in a program, but I said he needs to be put in a program, but sir, he needs to be put in a therapeutic program. He needs to be put in a therapeutic program where he can get the help that he was neglected in getting.
Commissioner, I can maybe give just one little thing there, and I apologize. In the presentation that I gave before I left in the fall, we used a UCR heat map of all of the UCR crimes that we have, which were those top 8 crimes, the ones that we had all the maps with all the stars on. And those are crimes that are reported to us by citizens of Gainesville. This is not self-initiated policing. This is not a police officer going to do increased patrols. And the mandate of the chief was, to me, is Jane Kernick, you need to reduce crime within the city limits of Gainesville. That's what the goal of the police department is. When the chief says we have a 9.3% reduction in that crime, that tells me that we did a very good job. But what we need to do is we need to really think about the areas with which we are seeing these large amounts of crime. And that reduction not only comes from arresting, not arresting individuals within a certain areas, but it tells me as a district commander where to send the police officers. If we have an increase of crime in a certain area and we go to the crime watches, and I go to crime watches all over District 2 for me, which is anything east of 13th Street, and I hear narcotics, narcotics, narcotics. In those areas with narcotics follows gun crime. So I tell my police officers, I need you to go to these areas where we've had specific crimes, because we know that that's where the crimes are going to be likely to occur again. And we've got maps and we've got crime analysis looking at those areas. This isn't Jamie Kernick initiating a police officer to go and indiscriminately stop anybody in the city limits of Gainesville for whatever the police officer wants. I'm giving them focused areas to focus their patrols on where we're seeing the highest number of violent crimes in those areas. And when we ended up putting the layer of the possession of cannabis arrests on top, if you look at the heat map and then you put the arrest for the cannabis, whether it's an NTA sworn complaint, whatever it is, you'll notice that the officers, the areas that were arresting the most people for those narcotics arrests are in the violent crime areas. And when we did that presentation, and I remember Commissioner Johnson saying, you're looking at the maps, it was very helpful to kind of see those, and we can provide that presentation again. The police department has done a very good job of being very focused in our response to the heat maps, the incidents that are happening, because we recognize that policing is changing in the United States. No longer can we do blanket enforcement where we go out and stop every citizen in the world for anything that we think is important or not important, because we were getting complaints from the neighborhoods. We were getting complaints from citizens saying, I got pulled over too much, or I got, oh, and you're always in my neighborhood. Why are you here? Why are you there? And we've had to sit in those community meetings and discuss this with citizens on a regular basis to say, the reason that you're going to see officers in here and the reason we have crime watches pack and all of the other things is to give the community those statistics, tell them what we're doing, why we're doing it, and letting them know that we're going to be in their neighborhood. Because I'll tell you, when I go to, and I can name several, a crime watch, and they tell me, Captain Kernick, thank you for those search warrants, because those 3 houses in our neighborhood have been a constant chronic plague for the last 6 months. Thank you for your efforts, because what we're doing is a very strategic focus on a certain area where crimes are occurring, and how do we prevent them on the long term. I will commend Captain Shentrip for our JBATS meeting, because what we do is we focus on individuals who need help. It's not just about how does the Gainesville Police Department continue to arrest as many people as we can. 25 years ago, that was our policy. Now it's, how do we stop that person from being arrested? How do we get them the services they need? And sometimes individuals are on such a path And sometimes we need to arrest them in order to get a judge to give them sanctions like drug or other help. And sometimes that's a little different from maybe looking at it from a different perspective, but what I will tell you, our juvenile meeting, we talk about services and wraparound services. The school board's in there, DJJ's in there, we've got a whole bunch of other entities helping these kids, because what I'll tell you as a young officer, I arrested the same juvenile 9 times on week after week after week, and the kid was never getting better. So Chief has said, how do we help them from not getting arrested and not being part of the juvenile justice system? And that's really where our focus has been. I'm very proud to say we've only had this very small number of arrests and this very small number of charges, because it tells me my officers are out there thinking, being creative, and really I understand the goal, but we can't really have a policy that tells an officer when to do that type of discretion, because the chief is training them, giving them the tools, and hoping that they will, when they go out in the community, we want them to talk and solve problems. We don't want to arrest everybody in the city. And our job as community police officers is not that. Our job is, how do we solve this problem with the community and get everybody involved? Commissioner Ward said that very eloquently. It's not just GPD, it's the whole community. It's the school boards, everybody. So, I'll give you that.
Commissioner, I don't know if your question got answered or not. We need to get back on focus.
Yeah.
Folks, we got a really, really important item that we put a lot of work into that we need to get. This is just an update, a briefing. So is your question answered, or do you need a follow-up? Okay, Commissioner?
Yes, it is very short. Everything, I just want to follow up with everything that you just said. I just want to say thank you. I mean, every time that we have these updates, I'm continually impressed at your approach to reducing crime and the deflection program, the JVATs, and I mean, it's really incredibly powerful work that you all are doing here. And I think, I want to thank you for it, because this is the kind of community that I want to live in. This is the community that I want to lead in. And it's so important, the work that you all are doing and the way that you're approaching it, so thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, Chief?
No, sir.
Okay, any members of the public wish to speak to this item? Let's go to the...
It's real short.
We have a microphone, we record it, so that way you'll be heard on the record. Thank you.
You made it start, it's better if I wasn't heard. I just want to say I hope violence disruptors doesn't turn out to be an unfortunate label. I can just hear the call. There's been a shooting. Get the VD out here.
Okay. We'll hope not. Shepard?
My name's Don Shepard, and I wanted to know how the officers, we have Officer Tech in our trailer park in Lamplighter, but yet I get my van shot, and there's no research done of it. I still have that hole in my fender of my vehicle, but yet I got no officer that took and researched it, find out who did that. I had nothing that happened about that case. Cases I'd like to take and have response back to the young man that I saved his life from being beaten. No officer got back to me about that either. And so I think we got loopholes in our police department that is not following up with the citizens in the areas to help stop the crime that's happening in the area. And I think these gang violence issues is in Lamplighter Trailer Park, and we're not getting an officer responding to that. I'm not seeing. So I would like an officer to respond to that.
Okay, thank you. We'll have somebody get back to you, Mr. Shepard, on that incident, but not
Captain
at
right
this
here.
moment.
Captain right here.
Yeah, we'll get somebody back
Right here,
here.
Shepard.
Anybody else to speak on this item? Okay, thank you all. Thank you for everybody from GPD that was here for that item. Very much appreciate the hard work that you're doing on that. Our next item is a report from our Mike. policy research team on violence prevention in the city of Gainesville.
George, he thinks he needs to be there. Got you with. So that's why I wanted to tell you that. I wanted to jump up and tell you, but I know we was on time. Yes, sir.
Okay, let's come back to order, please. Ms. Hoffman, welcome.
Hi.
That one.
I was just going to close the doors. Lindsay Hoffman, Policy Oversight Administrator. Thank you for having us. Today we're here at the behest of you, Mr. Mayor. Our office was asked to look creatively for gun violence prevention initiatives and options from around the country. So I'm pleased to introduce our fellow Morgan Spicer, who's conducted the bulk of this research. In your backup, I think there are 4 or 5 reports that Morgan did sort of tackling this from a variety of perspectives. And today she's here to distill the most important or interesting parts of what she found. So I will turn it over to Morgan.
Morgan, thank you for all the work on this.
Hi everyone, so I'm Morgan Spicer. I'm one of the Research and Prototyping Fellows with the Clerk of the Commission, and I'm here to discuss gun violence prevention efforts that can be taken by the City of Gainesville, in addition to some efforts that are already occurring in our community. So gun violence prevention is an incredibly complex issue that expands across all elements of government and our community. But when trying to understand potential options for local action on gun violence prevention, one of the most important elements is understanding what municipalities are not able to do under the Florida preemption law. So the state of Florida has one of the strictest preemption statutes in the country, with the state occupying the entire field of firearm regulation, from its purchase, sale, and transfer to its ownership, possession, storage, and transportation. In addition to this, the state of Florida statute subjects local legislators to personal liability and potential removal from office if they violate the preemption statute. Although this provision of the statute was struck down in 2019, the state of Florida has appealed this decision, and the potential penalties will remain in place until that appeal is heard. So due to this strict preemption statute, the City of Gainesville and Alachua County have enacted what ordinances they can in relation to regulating firearms, such as requiring a 5-day waiting period in connection with the sale of any firearm, and requiring a criminal history records check in connection with the sale of any firearm in the county. But Florida municipalities are prevented from implementing other popular policies, such as assault weapon bans or gun storage laws, by the preemption statute. So due to this high level of preemption at the state level, the main area where the city can act is at the community level. A really comprehensive of a community model for gun violence reduction that we would like to highlight is Cure Violence, which was also mentioned during GPD's presentation. Cure Violence is an internationally recognized program that has had enormous success in reducing gun violence levels in cities across the world, with some of its most notable examples coming from New York City and Chicago. Both of these cities saw large drops in violence in neighborhoods where the program was implemented. Chicago, homicides dropped by 35% across the city, and retaliatory shootings were eliminated entirely in 5 of the 7 communities which implemented the program. In New York City, a study found that there was an 18% reduction in shootings across 13 program sites, while control regions had a 69% increase in shootings. Cure Violence operates under the principle that the most likely predictor of violence is previous exposure to violence, and works with city officials, community members, law enforcement, and health services to stop the spread of violence. There are 3 key elements to this approach to preventing gun violence, which are detecting and interrupting conflict, identifying and treating the highest risk individuals, and changing community norms. All 3 of these elements rely on trained violence disruptors, similar to those discussed during GPD's previous presentation. Because Cure Violence operates in some of the most violent neighborhoods of some of the largest cities in the world, it is an incredibly resource-intensive program. From hiring and training staff to providing services, to providing services to those at risk of violence, the program requires immense participation from the local government and community members. While the City of Gainesville likely does not have the need or resources to implement Cure Violence in its entirety, its programmatic, community-based approach to gun violence is one which frames the policy options that we are going to discuss today. So we do want to emphasize that there is no single solution that will end gun violence in our community. Our office has approached this issue from a variety of perspectives, and we would now like to highlight some of the most actionable steps that the city can take to reduce violence, apart from the great work that our law enforcement is already doing. These options include the creation of a hospital-based intervention program, increasing educational and employment training for young residents, and creating more community awareness surrounding Florida's red flag law. So as stated earlier, the public health approach to gun violence operates under the principle that the best predictor of future violence is past exposure to violence. When individuals become victims of violence, panic and emotions among these individuals and their families run high, increasing the likelihood of acts of retaliation and violence. These emotions are at their peak in hospitals, and policy designed to de-escalate tensions during this crucial period of time can help to reduce violence. This is exactly what hospital-based intervention programs are designed to do, as they give communities an opportunity to interrupt that cycle of violence by helping to de-escalate the emotional situations at hospitals and offering victims and their families the assistance they need. These programs are designed to reach high-risk individuals who have been recently admitted to a hospital for treatment of a serious injury in order to ensure they do not remain in a cycle of violence or engage in retaliation after leaving the hospital. These victims of violence are screened by trained nonprofit staff or social workers to identify those most at risk for re-injury, and those individuals are then connected with case managers and social services. These services can include job or educational opportunities, counseling and therapy, or connection with community organizations and mentors. There is potential for the City of Gainesville to collaborate with existing nonprofits and organizations to implement this program, such as Shands Arts and Medicine, which is an organization that helps enrich hospital patients' healing experiences through visual, literary, and performing arts. A notable example of a hospital-based intervention program can be found from San Francisco, California. San Francisco's General Hospital's Wraparound Project was started in 2005 and has since seen a 400% decrease in the rate of injury recidivism. In this program, all patients who are victims of violent injury and are between the ages of 10 and 20 are screened by case managers. Those who are deemed most at risk of re-injury are invited to participate in the program to receive case management services and are guided to risk reduction resources. A study has found that the prevention of around 3.5 injuries a year makes the program cost neutral, and San Francisco's current hospital savings due to the program equate to around $500,000 a year. An additional actionable step the City of Gainesville can do to reduce gun violence is to target some of the root causes of gun violence, notably a lack of income and a lack of employment. Research indicates that individuals most likely to experience and become involved with gun violence are young individuals, largely within the age group of 16 to 24, who are not employed and are not in school. One potential option to assist these individuals is the creation of a career pathway program, which emphasizes educating and employing low-income youth, generally ages 16 to 24, to intervene and direct these individuals to futures free from gun violence. Communities which have implemented jobs programs have found that they are successful at reducing violence in the immediate term, and that many programs additionally have long-lasting impacts on violence. There are several reasons for this reduction in violence, including the fact that these programs improve the way that youth handle and avoid conflict, and that these programs provide them with tangible skills and resources they need for a successful future. Tallahassee's Tallahassee Engaged in Meaningful Productivity for Opportunity, or TEMPO program, highlights the multifaceted nature of gun violence by merging violence prevention and sustainability efforts. When Tallahassee created their Community Resilience Plan, which is designed to help the city overcome challenges including climate change, job, food, and housing insecurity, and poor infrastructure, The city also incorporated the TEMPO program, which seeks to educate and employ individuals aged 16 to 24 who are not employed or in school, with partnerships with businesses, nonprofits, and individuals. This program is similar to traditional jobs programs in the job training and academic support it provides to participants. However, this program was created as part of Tallahassee's resiliency strategy to emphasize training and hiring individuals in the industries that will create a more sustainable Tallahassee. Once individuals graduate from the program, they are placed either in city government or with companies creating green jobs, such as working with the city's drainage system, underground utilities, or building new roads and bridges. The program costs the city $500,000 annually, and the city has traditionally spent an additional $312,000 to employ several graduates of the program themselves. However, the majority of individuals go on to work in the private sector. In the 2 years since its founding, the program has had 640 participants, and they expect to have 1,000 participants by the end of the year. Of course, there are additional examples of educational and employment programs which do not emphasize sustainability, such as New York City's Train and Earn program or Ready Chicago, that rather focus more generally on providing job training and employment services in all fields for low-income youth. So in 2018, the state of Florida implemented a risk protection order policy, also known as a red flag law, which is used by law enforcement to petition a judge to take away guns from someone who is deemed a threat to themselves or others. Red flag laws have been shown to help reduce gun violence of all kinds, but have been most successful at helping to reduce suicide rates. 2/3 of all deaths in the United States are suicides, and on average there are 60 suicides every day around the country. With the passage of RPOs, states have seen large reductions in their suicide rates, with Connecticut's decreasing by 14% and Indiana's reducing by 7.5%. While this is an important tool for Florida governments to help reduce gun violence, we can do more here in Gainesville to ensure that community members, including family and friends of at-risk individuals, are aware of this tool and how it can be used to keep our community safe. In the state of Florida's red flag law, only law enforcement are able to petition for a risk protection order. Several other states contrast Florida's policy in that they allow for family or household members to petition for a risk protection order, and some states expand this to allow any individual, including those who are not family members, to petition to have an individual's gun removed. The reality is, the people who are most likely to know whether an individual presents a threat to themselves or to the community are those closer to them, and including family and friends. But currently, those individuals have little knowledge about red flag laws and are limited in the ways that they can influence the RPO process. There are several paths that the City of Gainesville could take to ensure that these individuals are more aware of how to utilize red flag laws. In order to help fill this gap, the City of Gainesville could establish a community hotline where community members, including family and friends, could call in to voice concerns about individuals who possess guns. This could serve the purpose of informing law enforcement about individuals who might benefit from the enforcement of red flag laws, in addition to providing community members a less stigmatizing method than calling 911 to alert law enforcement to potential danger. There are existing crisis hotlines in the Gainesville region, such as those operated by the Alachua County Crisis Center, which may be able to be leveraged for better red flag law communication, or the city could establish their own independent hotline. The city could additionally support a marketing effort to inform residents of this option, similar to the One Thing You Can Do campaign from Every Town for Gun Safety. These images are examples of the One Thing to Do campaign, which educates the public about how to use red flag laws to keep loved ones safe. Everytown's research on this campaign shows that across the spectrum, people are willing to use RPOs to help family members in crisis, but they generally aren't aware of the tool or how to use it. This campaign helps to increase awareness of red flag laws and combat fatalistic views of suicide and gun violence that may prevent family members from informing law enforcement about individuals who may pose a threat to themselves or others. Remaining on the topic of red flag laws, we would now like to transition to highlight some successes that we have seen in our local community in relation to gun violence prevention efforts. From March of 2018 to August of 2019, Alachua County has seen 5 risk protection orders issued. There have been other circums where firearms have been removed from individuals outside of the context of an RPO in Alachua County during this period. The number of RPOs issued in other counties across Florida varies dramatically, while some counties have seen 0 issued and others have seen several hundred. For instance, Broward County has issued 563 RPOs, and Highlands County has issued 114, while counties such as Bradford, Gulf, and Jackson have not issued any. The Gainesville Police Department has been trained on the intricacies of this new tool and is working on creating and implementing additional educational material, ensuring that our law enforcement are able to use this policy to keep our community safe. The Gainesville Police Department additionally implemented a gun buyback program in an effort to get unwanted weapons off the streets of Gainesville. This initiative began in August of 2019, where GPD collected 134 unwanted guns in exchange for gift cards or Xboxes. Another event was held in December of 2019, where an additional 121 weapons were collected. These events were both very successful and even had to end early when GPD had given out its monetary allotment for the events. Additionally, Green Dot Gainesville has worked in Gainesville to educate individuals on ways to prevent violent deaths and to shift community norms away from personal violence. Green Dot seeks to turn red dots, or areas where violence happens, to green dots, which are the areas in which the community is preventing violence. The organization has implemented several violence prevention programs, most notably holding bystander trainings to help individuals recognize violent behaviors that could cause harm to individuals. Green Dot specifically promotes the 3D approach to violence prevention, which is directly get involved, do something to distract, or delegate. These trainings mirror the Cure Violence approach, which also emphasizes training community members to be violence interrupters and is similar to the violence detectors, which again were detailed earlier in GPD's presentation. Also of note, in September of 2019, Green Dot held their Fading Out Violence Expo, which was a community event at Bodidley Plaza that highlighted different forms of violence in the community and ways to prevent those acts. It is important to note that funding was discontinued for Green Dot in September of 2019. However, an RFA will be released this summer with expected funding to start in February of 2021 that Green Dot can apply for in order to continue their great work.
Morgan, what's RFA?
Request for application.
Okay.
And this is, once again, a reminder of where we are in the policy process. And if you have any questions, we would be happy to answer them.
Can we just move that arrow to the end? Can we
Yeah.
slide it over?
Not on my watch.
Morgan, thank you so much. You've done some incredible work on this. Lindsay, same. I think one area of optimism is that what you brought back to us fits very well with what the chief just presented, and really the trajectory we have been on for quite some time. Will talked about since 2017, we've really been lowering our shoulder and really trying to forge ahead with this in a very intentional way. We're a little behind what some communities are doing, but I can tell you we're way ahead where most are, way ahead. And so, the question for me is, how do we embed this in our standard operating procedures as a community, not as a police agency or as a city government, but as a community, that gives people the tools and the opportunities to avoid violence. I think that we're well along in developing that culture. We're not there. We hear about, when we talk about more than 50 shootings in a couple-week period, we've got a problem. But I have developed friendships with mayors from Dayton, from El Paso, from Parkland, and we just cannot be complacent, because those kind of tragedies can very well happen here. They can. It takes one incident. The other part of this that doesn't get discussed is the 2/3 of gun deaths that are suicides. We completely ignore and hide that statistic. And so a lot of times we think about mass shootings, or we think about, as my friend Will, the retired judge and head of the law enforcement in St. Louis, friendly violence, that almost all of this violence occurs between people that know each other. So Chief, earlier when you were talking about if you trace back a common factor, the thing I thought you were going to say was that they know each other. They're very often related, or they're friends. All of the murders that we've had recently, I think that is the case. These are some substantial steps, I think, that we are prepared to take, already are taking in some regards. I think so there's two things, as we look moving forward for me, and I'm sure y'all will bring a lot more to the table. besides these. But, you know, so kind of with the manager has his good ear tuned in. You know, I think we need to seriously look at a budget increment that's going to allow us to do this properly. You know, you see what Tallahassee is spending. It might be redirected money in our budget that we choose to do on, you know, spend on this instead of something else, or it may need to be new money. And we just have to have that discussion as we enter our budget process. But if this is a priority to the commission, it's only going to work if we really put the resources behind it. In order to do that, to me, it means going and hiring people that live and work in the communities we're trying to address. You know, this is not going to be successful if we sort of post an ad for a job on the city website for, you know, violence prevention. We're going to have to approach the people we know have the credibility in the community to be effective, and then convince them that they want to work for the city of Gainesville and do this important work for our community. And we know they're there, and there's a great opportunity to do that. But it's going to require the resources. I also wanted to ask a question, and hopefully we can be candid. So we have not seen any GPD officers sort of activate the red flag law provisions for the RPOs. Are we at a point where we have adequate training and that our officers have a high degree of confidence in when it is appropriate to issue those protection orders? Are we in sort of process of developing that training and getting that high degree of confidence, or are we sort of still in the infancy of doing that?
So we're in the process of incorporating in our general order this process. When this came about, it came about pretty quickly, and it was not put in the process. And when it's in our general orders, it gives clear guidance to our officers as to when to use it, when not to use it. So we're in that process right now. As far as the training and the mechanisms, if we needed to do one today, we could consult with our legal advisor, because our legal advisor gets involved in this because it's a civil order versus something that would go through the criminal court system. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement just released through the governor's office a procedure for bigger threats that's going to put some more resources towards these types of situations, maybe not so much the suicide part, but the active threat people that are actively a danger to themselves or others in mass violence situations. So there are things on the horizon where training will be coming that will tie these things together as they go. I think part of the issue locally with the use of the RPOs is we've always found alternative ways of getting the guns out of their hands without actually getting an RPO in place, and then stop short of getting the RPO. I think what we need to do with our policy is advocate to continue through. So one of the things I'll emphasize here when we talk about this is it's only effective for people who can legally possess a firearm. People who cannot legally possess a firearm, you're spinning your wheels in mud to get an RPO because they can't legally possess a firearm. So if we get enough information in an affidavit type situation that that person has access and is possession of a firearm, then we can get a search warrant and go get the firearm. So it's more of a criminal path than it is the civil path of not only taking the gun away from them, but preventing them from buying a gun or getting a gun while the RPO is in place.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, but either way, we need the people around that person to know that that route exists. And I think that's something that's definitely
And they mentioned it before, and one of the things I was going to mention, and this may be a broader discussion, is in other jurisdictions, so I'll use Broward County for example. I know it's very got a lot of monetary resources, et cetera, but the county has social services that are robust down there, and a lot of this ties into the social services with the county down there. I don't know how the individual municipalities tie into that. I'm sure they utilize those services, but we know that the deflection diversion programs are run through their social services departments down there. So very often we, when it comes to suicide, don't get involved, unfortunately, until a person has started or has done the act. And so that's too late for an RPO to go into place. So in their report, as they pointed out, allowing the public to know that this resource is available, especially if family members or friends are concerned that this person is a risk to themselves and they have access to firearms, to contact us immediately so that we can start the RPO process. Getting that information out there and educating the public that that resource exists is paramount. But how do you get the message out there? We do partnerships with the county and the sheriff to provide combined communication services, but I'm not aware of any partnerships we have like that for social services that would put those pieces together, and that's their specific job, is to work on that area and talk about the resources that are available.
And we'll have to have a conversation with the county about this. So as you talk about Tallahassee, that's a one city county type situation, and they have combined a lot of those programs together so that the city and the county are jointly administering those. We can certainly fund the program ourselves, but we may be duplicating some effort. So I wanted to try to explore that part.
Sure, and thank you for that, Lee. We don't want to get the cart before the horse, because I think there's also probably some foundation money or some private money that we could seek out to do this. And so what the funding source is, I think more importantly, we need to, from the commission, we need to give direction that we want to move forward with this. Our staff can then figure out how to implement we're not going to develop the communications campaign. Our staff will do that. We'll figure out how to bring in partners. I have to imagine UF would be on board with this. It's a nightmare situation for any educational institution to have to deal with the suicide of the student. So they have a vested interest in it as well. The question then for you, Chief Campos, is do you need anything from the commission as far as direction or as we're moving forward with crafting some policy recommendations here, do you need anything from us in order to make sure that our officers are confident and prepared to issue RPOs, or do you have what you need?
I don't think so. I think once our policy is developed, we'll definitely share it with the manager, and if we think that we need to tweak it anymore and make it more robust, we're certainly willing to do that, but we're still in that process. I know there's several agencies that have sample policies out there that we can take a look at from South Florida.
I just want to be clear, we don't issue the RPO. We have to go to court, and the judge has to issue the RPO.
Right.
And the RPO is only a temporary, until there can be a full.
But they're the only ones that can go to the judge to do that.
Or the state attorney, yeah.
Yeah, so, that's why we need them, since they're.
Yeah, I was just on nomenclature.
Yeah, I understand.
Once that policy's in place, I think the officers will know it's there, they'll refer to it and know exactly what they need to do.
Okay, very good. The other thing I just want to share with the commission, we're I don't say super early stages, but I've been having conversations with folks at UF from the Arts and Healing Program, who do some amazing work, data-driven, awesome outcomes. They're very interested in being more actively involved in the larger community. They're looking at co-locating at different spots around the city. They'd love to have a presence at the new Kelly Center, that kind of thing, to really be a direct access to the community and the neighborhoods. We're starting discussions about perhaps them using their model for violence prevention, and it's uncharted territory. It really is. They're really interested, we're really interested, but it would really have to be something where we built it from scratch and did some pilots and they're going to look at it from an academic perspective. We're going to look at it from a community outcomes perspective. But when we talk about the partnership with UF, this is one of the ways that they have shown great interest, and where we, I think, really need them to make this effective. We need the expertise and the resources that they bring to bear. And so I think that goes more with the first of those 3 recommendations. But you know, when I brought this up way back at the city commission meeting, I said I want to think outside the box. I don't want to be constrained by, you know, what we're told we can't do. And I think this is one of those big things that we could possibly, you know, show some leadership on that might be, if we're successful, and it's very exportable to other communities that are facing the same challenge. So thank you for your patience on this. We had Gigi and then David, and then whoever else, everybody else. Gigi.
Thank you, Mayor. Morgan, this is great. You did a wonderful job, as always. Fantastic work. I kind of want to slow down a little bit and just think about the big picture and everything that we're talking about. We're talking about gun violence, and we're talking about what all that entails and why that happens. And I think what I'm hearing, what I'm not hearing, is that a significantly amount of African Americans or people of color are heavily influenced, or they are entrenched with violence, with particularly gun violence, and it's due because of systemic society ills and wills in our culture. And I think what I have not heard is, how do we attack that? How do we approach that? This is great, the research is dead on, but the reality of it is, African American males, as I can see in the research and as we know to be true, is impacted mostly in our community. And I'm not hearing a conversation on how we attack that, how do we get to that root cause? Because it's going to take partnerships, it's going to take resources, it's going to take social services, it's going to take wraparound services. And we can bring University of Florida to the table, we can bring all these other institutions, educational institutions to the table, but if you don't have something in place to combat systemic issues within a culture, we're going to keep going on this roller coaster ride, and that's just my personal opinion. So how do we take advantage of this research? How do we take advantage of Tallahassee and the resilient plan? Are we going to do a resilient plan? Does the resilient plan coincide with our strategic plan? How are we going to put all this together? Look at suicidal rates, look at all these other issues, but let's look at also, most importantly, how we can help a culture that's systemically being just ingrained with such violence. How do we combat that? And I know we're going to talk about the diversion program. I get all of that. I totally get it. But you have a culture, or you have a group of people that don't have necessarily the educational skills. They're coming from single parent homes. They're coming from all different issues, so many different problems. How are we going to start attacking that as it relates to this?
Commissioner, the chief about jumped out of his seat when he started talking about it, because he's passionate about this.
And I'm passionate about this as well.
So am I. You know, I'm passionate about this as well. I'm going to be very quick. You attack it one neighborhood at a time. I think we mentioned earlier Pine Ridge.
And we need to have this
you bring a comprehensive strategy, and it's something that all you commissioners said it earlier. The Gainesville Police Department can't do it by itself.
Right.
Okay, so I can't go in there and do it by myself. But working with the shams, working with the education, working with our violence interrupters that we're going to have, the disruptors, and I told him why I said that, which are civilians, which are people who have been involved in the criminal justice system, that is trusted in the neighborhood, that all of that coming together, and it's going to be like a test tube for us. We're going to look, and we're going to see where we effective in this particular neighborhood. And then I think, as we said earlier, you move to another community. You move to another community. But at first, we got to bring everybody, Commissioner, together.
and I hear you, but as I'm listening to this research and this particular topic, and I know it's gonna all come together.
Right.
But in Tallahassee, did they do it one neighborhood at a time?
Yeah,
Tell
matter of
me
fact,
how- tell me how.
Tallahassee, I was just in Tallahassee Monday. They have a program called the Tallahassee Peacemakers. So what the city of Tallahassee did not go in and do what they were doing, Sheriff Walter McNeil, he came in from the sheriff department. Walter's one of my mentors. Walt came in from Tallahassee, Leon County. It's called Leon All-in-One. They came in and worked with Tallahassee Police Department and combined together, and they created a strategy for the neighborhoods. And you'll see that they selected, they worked in select neighborhoods in Tallahassee.
And I think we've got to be careful of trying to make a direct comparison again with Tallahassee. If you look at the stats, okay,
they got some issues.
Their gun violence, even after these programs have been in place, it's still, I mean, it's devastating when you look at those numbers. And I don't want to speak bad about any of our fellow communities, but I'm not sure how effective the programs are if the goal is to reduce gun violence, because their numbers keep rising. Maybe they're not rising as much, but I do agree we need to be looking at alternatives, and we will. We'll come back to you with a program and increments.
And I want to say one other thing that we said earlier. With these programs, you don't come in with all the solutions. You talk with the people who live in the neighborhood, and they come up with some of the things that they see as the problem. I'm confident that in one particular community, that if we do it, and each community is going to be different, I think we can make a difference. I know we can make a difference in the neighborhood. But you're tackling, and there's another thing called, and I think you did some research on it, trauma communities. I don't know if y'all ready to start that. That's a whole nother discussion. But I think it goes back to some of the root causes, what you were saying earlier. But I don't know if the city of Gainesville is prepared to do something like that in that particular area. Now, I know we're running on time, but I can bring you back to trauma.
It's in your backup.
It's in your backup.
Yeah, I saw that.
Okay.
And by all means, I don't want to compare Gainesville to Tallahassee. That's not what I want to do. I was just asking because we are a very unique city with our own unique problems.
We are.
And what I'm simply saying is gun violence is we're talking about gun violence. That's the agenda, violence prevention in the city of Gainesville, pretty much. And we all know statistically that it's perpetrated by African Americans. Victims.
Right.
Black on black crime.
Right.
So, and we all understand that. And so what I'm saying is, in the research, I saw it, I'm hearing it, how are we going to make sure that that's one of the main focus, or one of our points as we proceed with this? I just don't want that to be lost.
We will have a coordinator that is going to work with the commission and everybody else. One thing I can tell you about Gainesville is we're blessed with resources, but we got to channel the resources into that community and make sure the resources are reaching the right people. And I think the city, not the Gainesville Police Department, the city, we have the expertise to do that.
Are we going to do a resilience plan, or is that something we're open to, or this just research?
This is just research. A resiliency plan is, and they're becoming more common around the country as issues of climate change and crumbling infrastructure become more urgent. And so cities around the state and around the country are doing them, but that's sort of a city-led initiative. It's not really, it's not a public safety thing. The interesting part about what Tallahassee did is they dovetailed the public safety and violence prevention elements with the resiliency plan. So they sort of created an umbrella to, you know, get a couple birds with one stone.
They have a lot of resources. I was up there Monday, matter of fact, and talked with the Peacemakers deputy commander from Leon County Sheriff Department.
But Mayor, that's just what I wanted to bring to everyone's attention. We know the data, we know the statistics, and I just want to make sure that that's a focus, one of the focus. Now, it doesn't have to be the main focus,
That's going to be what
but let's not lose sight
That's gonna be.
We have a systemic issue in our community as it relates to violence in the African American community. So let's look at those issues as well as looking at the broader issue of violence in the community. I don't want that to be left out.
Sure, and I mean, I think to your point, none of these things exist in a vacuum.
Right.
So we can't talk about this without talking about our race and equity
Right.
efforts. We can't talk about race and equity efforts without talking about our, economic opportunity efforts. So, they absolutely fit together, and I think we're fortunate in the effort and weight we're putting behind race and equity to do this at the same time, because we won't be able to.
Right, it has to
Yeah,
be.
absolutely, yeah. Dave?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would be in favor of us going towards some type of a comprehensive plan to deal with this, because we're going to need, I think, three key things: community training, as we have, and we have community partners who do that training, but really amplifying that voice with as many partnerships as we can make. Because the truth is, we do have all of this data about where violence occurs, but violence can occur anywhere. And so people all throughout the city need to be aware of how they can identify ways to divert that violence and prevent that violence from happening. That's going to take community-wide training. Second, public resources. I would be in favor of us having a resilience plan, and that part and parcel also has to do with some of the issues of climate change and the fact that they'll be having refugees come. But this goes back to the point that I brought up at the last topic, and the point that I think you all hear me say a lot, which is the chief mentioned a lot of times poverty has to do with violence, and so you have to give impoverished areas resources and investment so that there's other opportunities. And I think that what Tallahassee put forward for the resilience plan is an opportunity to get people who normally are not viewed as assets and treat them like assets, as people who can really help this community move into the future and move forward. And it's something that could really be great for a lot of communities. And then of course the private partnerships are going to be super important, because if it's just the government shouting all the time, if we don't have, for example, the Chamber of Commerce getting their businesses to participate with violence training, violence prevention, because violence can also happen in the workplace, and so that also needs to be taken into account. I would absolutely be in favor of budget increments for this fiscal year to get us started. We don't need to have $500,000 right off the bat. We need to, unless that's what staff did put together a comprehensive plan. But I think that we need to start somewhere so that over the course of the next couple of years, we can get to a place where there is this comprehensive training and resource safety net to really empower our citizens to avoid violent situations and to de-escalate and offer more opportunities for people who don't know how to get out of these cycles. Very good. Thanks. Arby?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks to everybody for the conversation so far, for all the work that you all put into it. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for bringing it up in the first place and pushing this forward. The three things in the presentation that really leap out at me as places where we can make a difference, in addition to creating a broader resilience-based model that will address lots of things in a detailed fashion, are hospital-based intervention. I think that's a really obvious thing that can take that heat of the moment approach and turn it into a less heated sort of thing. We can save lives by having the right person go to the hospital room and say, I know you want to go back to the neighborhood and take care of business. Don't. Here's why. I think that is a fixer of its own. Very interested in pursuing that. Green Dot, I think, is an effective program to help people understand alternatives to violence. I would like to see us find a way to fund that again in this community and on a greater scale than it had been before. I think it's effective. I think it helps people. It can do exactly what you were talking about, Commissioner. I think Green Dot or something very much like it
is an essential part of that, and I think it was making headway. Also, I'm very, very, very interested in helping the community understand red flag protections from a public awareness campaign standpoint. And we need to make sure that at GPD we have the resources to follow through then, and then it's up to the courts. We know that domestic violence is between domestic violence and suicide, that's where the real gun problem is. I mean, it is absolutely horrid when 50 people get shot at a club or God forbid at a school. But the everyday gun violence is domestic violence and suicides. I have a question about how the red flag programs work. And I'm specifically thinking about underage suicides, about under 18. They don't own the gun, I understand that. Dad owns a gun, mom knows Junior is suicidal. Can mom call 911 and say, I need you to come take the gun out of the house?
If mom wants to voluntarily give a gun up and gives it to us, we will take it. The problem becomes dad comes right behind her and says, I want the gun back. It's my gun.
It's my gun.
We have to give the gun back as long as he clears the background check before we release the gun.
Well,
and even if we get an RPO, just to be clear, if the judge grants an RPO and we go to get the gun, if the gun owner, say the father, says, look, I'll make arrangements for my brother to hold on to the gun, we have to allow them to do that. But the RPO is for who are you getting the RPO for? The juvenile can't legally possess the gun, so I don't believe the judge is going to issue an RPO for the juvenile. Are you shaking your head no, Anthony?
I mean, that's, you're right.
Right, okay.
Anyone that cannot legally possess a gun, we're not going to be able to get an RPO.
Right, so it would have to be an adult.
Felon who shouldn't have a gun to begin with, or if it was a domestic violence situation where the guns were required to be given up as part of the risk protection order, that person has no right to that firearm, and that would have been covered by the initial judge's order. So, and the RPO, and one more, just for everyone's sake, if I want to commit suicide and I say, I'm going to run out in traffic to kill myself running out in traffic, by Florida state statute, that doesn't mean that you can go to my house now and get the gun out of my house, because I said that I was going to run out in traffic and get run over because I'm distraught that I got divorced, or my girlfriend broke up with me, or I lost my job. We can't do that by Florida state statute. By Florida state statute, that risk protection order says that somehow in your conversation that you were going to harm yourself or others, you were going to use that firearm, and we were alerted to that fact, and now we go there with this backing, and now that risk protection order, once it gets approved, can be served.
Okay, let me be more specific then. Junior tells mom, I'm going to shoot myself with that gun that's in Dad's drawer. Dad is unwilling to give the gun up, but there's a clear intent, and it may not be real, but an intent has been given that that gun is going to be used in a suicide. Is it possible for the court to issue an RPO in that case, or is that just not?
Not that I'm aware of, because the RPO is on the individual, not the firearm. Okay.
Lindsay, you want to?
Florida also has not a great one, but we have a safe storage law that requires that adults keep their firearms locked away from minors. So in that circumstance, you could penalize the adult for not keeping the firearm away from the young person.
Can we verify that it is?
Yeah, but
Can
you
we
can't
go in and verify that it's
preemptively-
being kept safely?
So I'll talk to the police department more about this, but when I was I was actually involved in the second RPO issued in Broward County. Under the circumstances of that one were very similar to what Commissioner Ward was saying. In this particular case, it was a juvenile who wrote a love letter to his girlfriend, another juvenile, saying, "You broke up with me, and now I'm going to go shoot up a school." We got an RPO because the student's father had a bunch of guns in the house and kept them in a locker, locked locker, gun locker in the house. But we were able to convince the judge, at least on a temporary basis, that the child, juvenile, might have access to those guns, and we were able to go get an RPO issued to take those guns away until the evidentiary hearing occurred. Ultimately, the work out a deal with the father and all in terms of how they would be stored and access and issues like that. But the guns were ultimately returned. But there are, at least at one time that I'm aware of, there's a case out there where they weren't the juvenile's guns because he can't have them, but they were in the house and they could have been accessed in some manner to effectuate a crime. So, but it was a very tough thing to get. These RPOs are not like just go to the judge and they issue them like they do a search warrant. Right. There's a high evidentiary standard that has to be.
Well, and that's not honestly part of our policy discussion today. I mean, you can work with the attorneys and the police to figure that out. That's an administrative thing. We just want to make sure that you have the support that you need and the backup that you need to do it. But we understand that's ultimately, that exists, and nothing that the commission says or doesn't say that takes that away or makes that more likely.
Well, and here's the thing, if an RPO disrupts a suicidal ideation or domestic violence situation by a few hours, that might buy us a life. That's real, that's a thing. It doesn't have to be a permanent removal of a firearm.
Right.
It just has to interrupt the suicidal ideation.
And the thing
interrupt the anger in the DV situation.
Commissioner, the thing is, just like issuing, applying for a warrant, it's up to the judge.
Right.
So it's how much evidence that you bring before the judge, and if the judge feels that he or she has probable cause to issue that, that's when it'll happen. But we don't have the ability just to go in there and.
I hear you.
Yes, sir.
I get that.
So that's what I want.
There's an existing campaign for red flag understanding. Public understanding that there's the onethingtodo.org. And there are things we can plug into. I would like to see us, as a city, have our communications department look into that program and how they can help promote that. And again, the hospital-based interventions and Green Dot are all things that I would like to see us do. I would also like to see us build a resiliency plan, but that's a much bigger, broader topic that these can plug into, but that's for another day. But these, oh yeah, I want to do that, but these are three things that we can move forward.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I'm just keep jumping in here, but I don't want us to get too hung up on the resiliency plan part of this. As Morgan and Lindsay shared, other cities have created just a more employment-based intervention in general, and there's plenty of room for that in our community. It doesn't just have to be directed at resiliency. So, there's a lot we can do to move forward without that necessarily being or not being a part of it. But we do have the joint Climate Resiliency Committee now that evolved from the Water Policy Committee that I know that will be a major thing that y'all discuss. And then the manager shared with me the other day about a committee that they're going to recommend to us that we form that will do some work over the next 10 months and then come back with some very specific policy recommendations. And that will be one of the things that I know that they discuss. So that's coming down the pike. Anyway, Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for bringing this forward, and thank you, Ms. Hoffman, and Ms. Spicer as well for working on this, but also the buffer zone 1 fog along with that. Who, was it the county or the state was funding Green Dot?
It came from CDC, but then it was through the county, the Department of Health.
Through the state to the county.
Like a pass-through grant? And that
Yeah,
kind of-
so it was from the CDC, it went to the Florida Department of Health to their Alachua County office.
And one other question on Chief Jones on the gun buyback. When do you expect to, do you have plans to do a feature one? I know you talked about having ones in multiple locations. Is that still in the plan?
Yes, sir.
Or do you think
I
those
do
will-
plan to have one in multiple locations. I'll probably look at late spring, just before summer. And I will change the location. I will do it at multiple locations, particularly with the disruptors that we're hiring. We're going to try to attract additional individuals to be a part of that.
And I'm sorry, if I could return to the Green Dot. There's nothing saying that you have to take state funding in order to do Green Dot. Anybody can go and do Green Dot. That was $100,000 that they were granting, that they hope to grant again. But it's just it's a program that anybody can do.
And we have Ms. Coons here, who was the head of that program. So if Ms. Coons, we'll give you an opportunity to address this in just a second. Thanks for being here.
You said Campos or Chief, not Campos, Chief Campos. It's hard to change. You said that we are working on training our officers to be able to implement the red flag law. We're not there. We don't have the policy set, I guess.
They've already had training.
They have had training.
Yes.
You said you were waiting. You've not.
We don't have the formalized policy yet.
Okay.
In our general orders.
When do you expect to have that policy in the general orders?
Our goal is to get it within a month, but we're also in the process of getting accredited, so we're prioritizing getting that done for our accreditation date.
Thank you.
And we slow it down.
Looking at these programs, I do think I think a lot of this is partnering, and I think one of them on hospital intervention. I definitely think we should. I think that's a good program. One thing we do have to look at. I mean, came up in the last conversation about the technical briefing that our trauma center is the trauma center for North Central Florida, and how we're doing, and everyone comes there and being able to discriminate. Well, you're not in this. Your incident didn't happen in the city of Gainesville, so we're not going to talk to you. I think one of the questions and one of the discussions we need to have with how do we equitably fund a program like this so that the city of Gainesville is not taking on the full burden of doing this for 10, 11, 12, 13 different, probably even bigger than that because of the Shansker helicopter that flies in. So I think that's something we need to look at in terms of how do we equitably fund that program, but I think that would be very good for us to use. And I think that goes on to both the Green Dot and other things. A lot of this is social service oriented stuff, and that is the county's mandate, and they keep on trying to pass it on to us. I think we need to push back to ensure that these programs are funded by the county, and that even when we look at like, oh, we'll split it 50-50, a lot of this money is coming out of the general fund of the county, which means that the city of Gainesville taxpayers are paying twice for it. And that's one of the things we really need to, I think, push back on this, on getting the county, these are county things that they should be funding. A lot of other counties around the state and the country, the counties fund these programs. And I think that's one of the things that we really need to push them to do. I do have a question on the, I don't have to have this right now, but kind of, I know our murder rate is low, but I would like to get some data on the number of shootings and the number of injuries that happen from shootings, and then also looking at, I don't know if this hospital, maybe for HIPAA stuff, but the shootings that are going to the hospitals and what's actually going to the ER, and how many of those shootings are happening and our injuries are happening because of an event that happened in the city of Gainesville versus events that are happening in other counties and other corporate areas. I don't know if that is information we get legally or not, but I would be interested to see that, to see kind of what is kind of inside the city's realm. I also think we should look at, to your point about the red flag laws and yours, is I think we should try to do a hotline, and I think that would kind of being another way to be able to connect. I think people are scared to call 911 sometimes on an incident like this, and they don't know, is this where I should go? And to be able to kind of call a place, somebody they can kind of work things through. Maybe that crisis hotline is the one somebody who's experienced would be able to figure, hey, you need to call 911, or hey, we can pass this along, but I do think that's something that we should look at partnering and look at educating for. But I would like us to move forward with these. I just want to make sure that when we look at our funding, that we are not funding things that the county should be funding, and if they're not going to do it, I guess we have to, but we need to make sure that we're equitably funding these social services, and the city of Gainesville is not taking on these costs. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
And to add to that, grant opportunities.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know that our staff has some idea about where some of that might lie. Violence in this community definitely doesn't discriminate across city, county borders. I mean, so many of it, especially when we talk about the gang activity and the sort of the high risk, that definitely, you know, exists in the unincorporated area and in the city. So it would be hard for me to imagine that this would not be something that the county would want to partner on. I mean, knowing those county commissioners, you know, and you know, we can start discussions with the sheriff. You know, we don't know who the sheriff is going to be 6 months from now because there is an election. But you know, I think starting those discussions. So, you know, for me, I want to move forward with all of this. I think it's all important. You know, so you know, getting the timeline together. I think there's some things that we can do very quickly. I mean, the RPO thing, it exists. It's more about, you know, building it out. You know, I think we're going to have a discussion with the Crisis Center hotline. In fact, Allie has an awesome article in the Sun right now. I saw it online. I don't know if it's going to be in Sunday's paper, but they're phenomenal. She's phenomenal. She cares about this so much that I think if approached correctly, and we weren't just trying to pile something onto them, but we were going to give them the resources they needed to do it, they could do it. We don't have to reinvent the wheel there. You know, and then really get our staff getting into some of the more difficult things like the hospital-based interventions and you know, the community disruptors, as you're calling them, and then, you know, working, I don't know if we partner with Youth Build or we create our own program, but, you know, the sort of transition from violence into employment, all that stuff's going to be a lot more work and going to have budgetary implications. So we need to know what those are, and you need to tell us the resources that need to be replaced to make them effective, you know, so we can make a decision over the next couple months on that. So that's where I am. Let's hear from the public, and then we'll get a motion on the floor. Anybody from the public wish to speak to this item? Ms. Coons, if you didn't catch all that, we're trying to save your program.
Thank you.
We know the value of it. We wanted it to continue. Ms. Shepherd, welcome.
Wait until she speaks.
No, she didn't get up. Go ahead.
I think it's an excellent opportunity to do this, and I like what I'm hearing in this meeting. I think this is a good implementation for the career that Tony Jones has built himself here in Gainesville. The implementation that he brought here in Gainesville has made the safety of our public 1,000% better. He's still yet working on that. And that I'd like him to also have some of these tools in which we mentioned here today, they can be implemented within his force so that he can handle training a team that he has thought about back years ago when he first came on the force. I can't take and pat him on the back enough to see what kind of change he's made here in the city of Gainesville, and I want to see even more. With that, I thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Shepherd.
I'm glad to see these ideas happening, and I continue to be particularly concerned about the youngest people in the community. Years ago, when I worked at Community Control, I remember so often co-workers in that department telling me, Don't ever be alone with that one. Don't turn your back to that one. And they're really afraid of the children. And I just treated them like I treated my own son. And all the times that I rebuked and encouraged and gave pop quiz questions to those kids in my caseload, no one ever even so much as spoke back to me. They wanted somebody to treat them like they cared, somebody to treat them like they had value so they could value themselves, who didn't treat them as guilty by identity or dangerous by identity. So I think it's all about connecting to people, connecting to young people particularly in a respectful way and regarding their humanity as valuable.
Thank you, Carl. Anybody else wish to speak to this item? Come on now. Welcome.
Thank you all so much for this effort. Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, Mr. Police Director. I just left the SWAG community where I teach yoga there, and to see the transformation, and I taught yoga to these children in public housing, Boys and Girls Club, all as part of what we do with Green Dot. I did have a conversation this morning with Hans, and I'll get back to that. I want to make sure I say this, with Hans in Tallahassee, who's the director for this grant. There will be an RFA put out this summer. I am still available to teach the Green Dot program. I'm doing it for a church in next month, and continue to keep that message going as I'm interacting with the children and the people that I come in contact with in the SWAG community. We are taking children and adults on a yoga retreat because I want them to further help them understand what it means to be every day we have a class, we have a word that we use. And today was mindfulness. Last week it was peace. And we talked about what does it look like to wear peace. I asked them, how do you identify a police officer? And they talked about his uniform, his badge, his guns. And then I asked them to tell me, what does it look like if you're wearing peace? I look forward to the day in this community and other communities where we can say we are wearing peace. We're not just talking about it, but we're wearing it. We take our children to sporting practices, music lessons, to tutors to help them do better academically, but how often do we practice peace? And that's what this yoga retreat is being called, that we're taking children on during spring break. It's called Peace Takes Practice. And we're taking the children and the adults from SWAG community to a place called Casa Micanopy. So the Green Dot program embraces all of that. What you're talking about today does take practice. I am available to work and do whatever you need me to do to help move this forward. And again, thank you for moving this, the needle on this program.
Thank you. Thanks for all your work you do with Green Dot, just extraordinary. Anybody else wish to speak on this item? Okay, let's turn back to the commission. Anybody prepared with a motion? Go ahead.
Well, I wanted to get unanimous consent for the motion, so I think the best way forward is to ask for staff to come back with a timeline to develop a comprehensive violence prevention plan for the city council.
Okay, is there a second? Second. Okay, so I mean, I think we're asking all the above, everything that you brought, we're on board with and want to continue working towards. And I want to just single out Will Halvosa. This man's retired. Yes, he's around all the time working on this stuff because it's so important to him. And you know, he's actually somebody that's sought out nationally to talk about these things. Will, I know just your heart is absolutely 100% in this. And so I really just want to thank you for doing this work so the rest of the department can continue focusing on the day-to-day police work that they're doing. But we wouldn't be in this place today without you and all the work that you've done. I know that. And I know that you're going to be just as embedded with where we are headed in the future, and that makes me very excited. So, you know, I just thank you so much, and I look forward to continuing to work on all this stuff with you. And same with you, Morgan, Lindsay. I know this is work we all care about deeply, and we can really not only make a difference, but set an example for other communities until we get some legislative relief, you know, and we're actually able to do some things that will be even more impactful. So, with that, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. All right, thank you all so much for this. Next item on the agenda is public comment. Anybody here to speak of anything not on our agenda is welcome to do so now. Mr. Feinwald.
Hello. I have a couple of documents I'm going to share with you, very brief ones. The first is a letter to James Peters at American Planning Association. So when I say APA throughout this, that's American Planning Association. January 27th, 2020, per your letters of November 11th, 2019 and January 17th, 2020, I have made no further use of the AICP credential. For your information, I first received the AICP by some unknown action of an officer of the state APA chapter in Alabama in 1983. This was done in recognition of my service as statewide planning student representative to the professional state chapter and as coordinator of a community housing resource board in Huntsville. After moving to Gainesville in 1987 and entering into an associate planner position with the Regional Planning Council serving the North Central Florida area, it was my intention to officially engage with APA and the AICP credential. In fact, the check was written at the time I began to realize that my supervisors, all AICPs, instead of facilitating egalitarian treatment of all the citizens in my assigned towns, were intending to play along with the age-old, good old boy systems of exploiting and neglecting their black neighborhoods. I was expected to use assessments of these deprived communities to qualify city governments for state and federal funds, of which not a jot or a tittle would be expended on the obvious deficits in infrastructure and services which were just good enough for their citizens of color. I tore up that check when I saw I would no longer have an income from planning. Though I make my living today in other work, I have served on various boards and committees of local government, legal services, public housing, workforce development, and various community service organizations, delivering a wide range of support programs. I have done some of the work to be expected of ones trained in community development, including exposing and confronting the drivers, again, AICPs all, of gentrification and elitist development in this community. In fact, I would wager it was one of these prostitutes of planning who took the step of alerting you as a vindictive counterattack for interfering with inequitable development. But I am unsullied by the loss of this tainted brand, AICP. I suggest that you check those who have purchased this tag of false integrity for the ignominy toward which they are turning the planning profession. What you term misuse might better be called polishing or elevation in this context, K.R. Blount. And that's in response to a letter from the ethics officer at APA who said I was misusing AICP.
Thank you, Mr.
And
Blount.
so I'll have to share some other time this language I tried to put in the charter about racial equity.
Anybody else like to make any comments? Items not on our agenda. Okay, any member comment? All right, thank you all very much. That was a good meeting. I really appreciate it, and we did a lot of good work. With that,